Following the conclusion of Xianxia's voice transmission, Hu Qinglei's expression eased as he turned to Han Li and said, "So you're familiar with devilish concubine Ling Long, and you contributed significantly to the devil-slaying effort on the Kunwu Mountains, fellow Taoist Han. Tusk, you were also responsible for what happened at the Yin-sifting sect recently. I must say, I'm quite surprised. I'd thought that a deity transformation cultivator had been responsible for these feats. In that case, you really are powerful enough to be regarded as my equal fellow Taoist Han. I've also heard a lot about you, Brother Hu. I hope you'll forgive me for making an unannounced visit like this," Han Li replied with a respectful smile. "Of course, I'm naturally more than willing to acquaint myself with a brilliant prodigy like you, fellow Taoist Han." Hu Qinglei then turned to Xianxia with a smile on his face and asked, "By the way, you two have some recollection of the other fellow Taoists here, right?" The nascent soul cultivators standing behind Hu Qinglei had been completely dumbstruck upon learning the fact that Han Li had been involved in the Yin-sifting sect incident that they had just been discussing. Furthermore, they were even more surprised to see Hu Qinglei regarding Han Li as an equal. Only after being prompted by Hu Qinglei did they receive the opportunity to extend respectful salutes towards Xianxia, an eccentric wind, to which the two merely waved their hands to acknowledge their salutes. However, after paying his respects to Xianxia, an eccentric wind, one of the nascent soul cultivators suddenly cupped his fist in a salute toward Han Li. An envious look appeared on his face as he said, "Congratulations, Brother Han. It's been a long time since we last met, and you've already progressed to the late nascent soul stage." This was a young man in a set of green robes. He was none other than Old Man Bitter Bamboo, whom Han Li's humanoid puppet had once fought against. He was still at the pinnacle of the mid-nascent soul stage after all this time, so it appeared that his cultivation path would conclude here. Han Li didn't have a great impression of this Old Man Bitter Bamboo, but he still smiled as he replied, "I didn't think that I would meet you here, either, fellow Taoist Bitter Bamboo. I only managed to progress to the late nascent soul stage through sheer luck." Old Man Bitter Bamboo gave a slightly awkward cough upon hearing this, and he was just about to say something else when Hu Qinglei impatiently interjected, "All right, this is not the place to talk. If you don't mind, you can all come to my palace for a chat, fellow Taoists." As such, Old Man Bitter Bamboo could swallow his words as he offered Han Li a smile. Thus, the ground flew downward together, heading toward the palace that Hu Qinglei and the others had emerged from. Everyone entered the palace before taking a seat. Hu Qinglei was seated right next to Hu Qinglei along with Xianxia's trio, clearly setting him apart from all of the other guests present. It was no surprise that Xianxia and Eccentric Wind were offered seats next to Hu Qinglei as they were deity transformation cultivators as well. However, Han Li was only at the nascent soul stage, yet he had been given the same treatment. That was quite bemusing to all of the cultivators present, and everyone was speculating about his identity. All of the guests in the palace were prominent characters in the cultivating world, and even they were all quite perplexed. None of them allowed their confusion to creep onto their faces. However, the cultivator beside Old Man Bitter Bamboo was unable to repress his curiosity, and asked him about Han Li in a quiet voice. Even though he had made effort to keep his voice down, the entire palace was filled with high-grade cultivators, so his question was still audible to everyone. Old Man Bitter Bamboo had only met Han Li once, so he was unable to provide much information, much to the dismay of all of the cultivators eavesdropping on their conversation. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D45C, letter 1D62E. Meanwhile, Han Li remained seated calmly in his chair with a calm expression, looking as if he were completely oblivious to the fact that everyone was dying to know who he was. Hu Qinglei was chatting with Xianxia and Eccentric Wind, as well as some other nascent soul cultivators, and it appeared that none of the three deity transformation cultivators were going to introduce Han Li. As such, no one dared to ask them about Han Li either, so they could only continue to deny their curiosity. After a short while, the blue-robed scholar turned to Han Li with a meaningful expression before suddenly rising to his feet. He cupped his fist in a salute extended toward Han Li as he asked, "Fellow Taoist Han, I heard from Senior Hu earlier that you had something to do with the incident that had taken place at the Yin-sifting sect not long ago. Is that true?" Han Li was surprised to hear this question. He merely nodded calmly and replied, "I was indeed involved in the incident that took place at the Yin-sifting sect. Why do you ask? Are you connected to the Yin-sifting sect somehow?" I'm just an itinerant cultivator with no ties to the Yin Sifting Sect, but I have met fellow Taoist Fang from the Ying Sifting Sect on several occasions. This is not an extremely important matter, but I just wanted to ask if fellow Taoist Fang's death had anything to do with you, the blue-robed scholar asked with a solemn expression. All of the other nascent soul cultivators in the room had all fallen silent upon hearing this, awaiting Han Li's response to this question. Hu Qinglei's conversation with Xianxia, and the others had also come to a temporary conclusion, as he turned his attention toward Han Li with a hint of a smile on his face. Han Li narrowed his eyes and replied, "If you really want to know, then I have nothing to hide. The master of the Yin Sifting Sect was indeed killed by me." His response created quite a stir among all of the nascent soul cultivators present. "I see. Thank you for answering my question, Brother Han." The blue-robed scholar was also rather shaken by this response, but he merely nodded before taking a seat again. This was rather surprising to Han Li, but he remained silent as a smile appeared on his face. Hu Qinglei chuckled upon seeing this, and was just about to say something when a servant in a palatial dress made her way over to him, ducking down by his side in a dainty manner before whispering something in his ear. Hu Qinglei nodded and stroked his beard as he chuckled. "Even before your arrival, you were planning to see my 3 concubines-to-be, and I agreed. They're right outside the palace now, so I'll call them in to pour some wine for you. He, feel free to bring out your congratulatory presents in advance. Especially you two, Brother Wind, Brother Xiang, you have to make sure to offer some presents of substantial value. Otherwise, it'd be quite embarrassing for you two, if these juniors present were to make offerings more precious than yours. HMPH, ever since we first met, I've lost count of how many treasures I've had to give you as presents because you keep taking more and more concubines. You sure are a lucky old rascal." Eccentric Wind harumphed as a resigned expression appeared on his face. Despite his protests, he still flipped a palm over to produce a small wooden box, which he placed onto the table before him. Xianxia also pulled out a jade box with a smile, but didn't say anything. Not only was Hu Qinglei not enraged by Eccentric Wind's words, he burst into raucous laughter instead as he said, "Ha, don't try to accuse me of benefiting from you too. All of the presents you've offered have been given to my concubines, and I haven't kept any for myself, so don't be so stingy. Besides, these treasures are nothing in comparison to your enormous wealth anyway, so you may as well hand them out to my beautiful concubines." All of the other cultivators in the palace also began to offer congratulatory presents of their own, among which there were rare materials as well as dazzling ancient treasures. Han Li had already decided on what present he was going to offer prior to coming here, and he pulled out 2 vials of pills from his storage pouch. These pills were very effective for nascent soul cultivators to advance their cultivation bases, so it wasn't a bad present by any means. Just as Han Li was examining all of the other presents being offered, he heard the sound of footsteps from outside the palace gates, following which a group of servants in 5-colored palatial dresses strode in with 3 exquisite beauties at the center of their group. All of the cultivators in the palace turned their attention to those 3 women in unison, and gasps of awe rang out in quick succession. These 3 women really were extraordinarily beautiful. One of them was rather petite, but her skin was as fair as snow, and her facial features were like intricate works of art. Another had an elegant figure with a pair of seductive eyes that were capable of captivating one's soul. The last one to complete the trio was a lithe and graceful woman with luscious black hair. She was also quite an exquisite beauty, but the expression on her face was rather aloof. All 3 women possessed exceptional looks and cultivation bases, and it was really difficult to determine which of the 3 was the most beautiful at first glance. However, the lithe and graceful female cultivator's facial features were exceptionally gorgeous, and each and every one of her movements seemed to infused with an air of seduction. However, her expression was quite cold, and her eyes were completely blank, creating a stark contrast that somehow lent her a unique sense of allure, and all of the cultivators present couldn't help but take an extra glance at her. In contrast, Han Li's body abruptly shuddered upon seeing this woman, and his expression changed drastically. "You 3, come and pour some wine for our fellow Taoists. They didn't come all this way here just to congratulate me. Violet Spirit, come here and pour some wine for my 3 esteemed guests here," Hu Qinglei instructed as he gestured to the lithe and graceful woman. The other 2 women nodded with dainty smiles in response. Immediately thereafter, 3 servants made their way toward the 3 women, holding jade platters that were each carrying a wine flagon along with several cups. The two women accepted a platter each and began to offer wine to all of the guests. In response, all of the cultivators hurriedly rose to their feet and thanked them for their efforts. However, the exquisite beauty by the name of Violet Spirit didn't immediately do as she was told. Instead, her brows furrowed slightly before she turned her gaze toward Xianxia and the others. A shudder ran through her entire body as she caught sight of Han Li, and the life seemed to have returned to her blank and aloof eyes. She stared intently at Han Li, seemingly unable to look away. A series of emotions appeared on her face in rapid succession, beginning with incredulity, then elation, and finally a hint of concern. Judging from her strange reaction, anyone could tell that she and Han Li were acquaintances, and very close acquaintances at that. Hu Qinglei's expression immediately darkened upon seeing this. The entire palace had fallen completely silent, and everyone turned to Violet Spirit and Han Li with peculiar expressions on their faces. "Do you know fellow Taoist Han, Violet Spirit?" Hu Qinglei asked. His voice wasn't very loud, but they sounded like booming thunderclaps to Violet Spirit. Violet Spirit hurriedly withdrew her gaze from Han Li as she forced a smile onto her face, and replied, "Brother Han is indeed an acquaintance of mine." She was trying to act in a calm and collected manner, but the drastic rise and fall of her chest clearly suggested that she was unable to contain her emotions. "Violet Spirit, I didn't think that I would meet you here," Han Li said with a wry smile. However, his expression quickly reverted back to normal. Hu Qinglei was silent for a moment before continuing in an indifferent voice. "It's great to hear that Violet Spirit and fellow Taoist Han are familiar 0-0 with each other. Why don't you offer some wine to fellow Taoist Han? First, Violet Spirit. After entering my devil palace, you must cut all ties with your past life, so this cup of wine can act as a final farewell to fellow Taoist Han." He didn't seem interested in asking about what relationship Han Li and his concubine to be shared. The forced smile on Violet Spirit's face immediately stiffed upon hearing this. One of the servants beside her handed her a jade platter, which was carrying a wine flagon and a green cup. Violet Spirit looked down at the items on the platter, and her silky hair obscured most of her face, making it impossible for anyone to glean her current facial expression. However, she only faltered for a brief moment before gently picking up the wine flagon. As she did so, the tense atmosphere that had descended over the palace lifted considerably. The dark expression on Hu Qinglei's face also eased upon seeing this. Han Li looked on in silence as Violet Spirit poured out a cup of wine before raising the cup with both hands. She raised her head and made her way over to Han Li in a graceful manner. At this moment, all of the emotion had disappeared from Violet Spirit's face. She had adopted her cold and aloof facade again, and she was appraising Han Li as if he were a complete stranger. Han Li's lips twitched slightly upon seeing this, but his expression remained unchanged. "Fellow Taoist Han, please accept this cup of wine." Violet Spirit's voice was extremely flat and monotonous, as if those words were being spoken by a mere vessel without a soul. Her pitiable display evoked within all of the cultivators present a sense of sympathy. Han Li didn't immediately reach for the cup of wine that was being offered to him. Instead, his gaze roamed up along Violet Spirit's arm, over her body, then finally settling on her intricate porcelain-like features. His eyes slowly narrowed, and a tense atmosphere returned to the palace. Hu Qinglei's expression remained unchanged, but a cold light flashed through his eyes. Xianxia seemed to have sensed something, and his brows furrowed as he took a glance at Hu Qinglei. Meanwhile, eccentric Wind merely chuckled as he looked at Han Li and Violet Spirit's peculiar interaction, and it was impossible to glean his thoughts. As for all of the other nascent soul cultivators, all of them also wore contrasting expressions, but it was quite apparent that most of them were looking forward to the imminent misfortune that was about to befall Han Li. Han Li raised a hand and suddenly took the cup of wine from Violet Spirit before downing its contents in one go. This turn of events came as quite a surprise to everyone within the palace. Hu Qinglei raised his eyebrows for a split second before his expression reverted back to normal. A mixture of complex emotions surfaced in Violet Spirit's blank eyes, but she didn't say anything either, as she took the empty cup from Han Li and prepared to turn away. Just as everyone had thought that Han Li had bowed to Hu Qinglei's unspoken intimidation and that it was time to move on, Han Li suddenly said, "Hold on. If I'm not mistaken, a restriction seems to have been placed on your body, right, Violet Spirit?" Violet Spirit shuddered once again as her footsteps unconsciously faltered. The entire palace had fallen silent as everyone looked on with bated breath. Even a pin drop could be audibly heard amid the deathly silence. Qinglei's face remained completely expressionless as he calmly downed the wine in his own cup, then said, "Have you had a bit too much to drink, fellow Taoist Han? You're speaking like a drunkard. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D4 2B, letter 1D5 56, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D6 04, letter 1D6 AT, letter 1D5 54, letter 1D5 60, letter 1D4 6. The discontent in his words was already very apparent. "Don't worry, brother Hu. I may have had a few cups of wine, but I'm still very much sober and capable of coherent speech." Han Li chuckled nonchalantly as if he were oblivious to Qinglei's displeasure. Qinglei looked down at the crimson ring on one of his fingers as he mused. "Is that right? Let me ask you something, Violet Spirit. Do you think fellow Taoist is already drunk but simply doesn't know it himself?" Violet Spirit's expression changed several times in quick succession upon hearing this, and she opened her mouth to say something, but failed to utter a single sound. Qinglei seemed to have sensed the hesitation in Violet Spirit's heart, and he turned his gaze toward her. As he raised his head, everyone was given a fright at the sight of his face, and chills began to run down their spines. Qinglei's facial features had been completely normal just a second ago, but a layer of black qi had suddenly appeared over his face, and at the same time, his eyes had turned red and were shimmering with a cold light. Those were not the eyes that a human should possess. "Fellow Taoist you," Xianxia wanted to say something, but was abruptly cut off by Qinglei's frosty voice. "Even if this is a friend of yours, do you expect me to suffer in silence in the face of his insolence? If he doesn't give me a proper explanation today, then I'll make sure he never leaves this place." Xianxia could only give a wry smile upon hearing this. Instead of trying to persuade Qinglei, he turned to Han Li with a shake of his head and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Han, you're aware of what you're doing, right? I won't be able to help you here. You'll have to give Brother Hu an explanation yourself. I trust that you'll be able to give Brother Hu a proper explanation." After saying that, Xianxia closed his eyes to meditate, appearing as if he weren't interested in intervening with this matter. Even though Xianxia hadn't said much, Han Li could read between the lines and tell that he was trying to protect him. It was just that Xianxia and Qinglei were both deity transformation cultivators, and he clearly didn't want to engage Qinglei in a direct conflict. As such, he could only offer a few cautionary words before detaching himself from the situation. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he turned to Violet Spirit and asked, "Violet Spirit, we've known each other for many years and you're one of my few close friends. You have a restriction in your body, which suggests that you've been forced into this arrangement. I don't want to offend fellow Taoist Hu, but I'm not heartless enough to completely ignore the situation when it's possible that you're being forced to do something against your will. I want you to be honest with me. Are you willing to become Brother Hu's concubine? If so, then I naturally wouldn't insist on ruining a mutually loving relationship. However, if you're not willing..." Han Li's voice trailed off here, but the implications behind his words were quite apparent. Violet Spirit's face was filled with a mixture of urgency, hesitation, helplessness, and a series of other emotions. She seemed to be eager to respond but didn't know what to say. "There's no need to ask her. It doesn't matter whether she's willing to become my concubine or not. What are you going to do even if she's being forced into this arrangement against her will? Are you going to forcibly take her away from here?" Qinglei turned to Han Li with a deriding sneer. "So you really are being forced against your will? Is that right, Violet Spirit?" Han Li asked for confirmation. Violet Spirit was petrified of Qinglei, but Han Li had progressed to the late nascent soul stage and didn't seem to fear Qinglei. Upon making these observations, a desperate impulse flashed through her heart as she gritted her teeth and replied, "Several years ago, I unintentionally revealed my true appearance and was forcibly captured by a few heavenly devil sect elders. I was never given a choice in the matter." Qinglei merely remained silent and listened with a cold smile on his face. All of the other cultivators present also displayed minimal reactions. Forcibly abducting female cultivators was very frowned upon in righteous Dao sects like the High Zenith sect, but it was an extremely commonplace occurrence in devil Dao sects, to the point that it was regarded as something that was completely justified and reasonable. All the cultivators present naturally weren't related to any righteous Dao sects, so it was no surprise that they weren't appalled in the slightest. "That's all I needed to hear, Violet Spirit. Brother Hu, I have no intention of causing any offense to you, so there's no need for you to be angry. Everything in this world has a price. I'm willing to offer something in exchange for fellow Taoist violet spirit's freedom, Han Li said in a calm voice, appearing as if he were completely oblivious to Hu Qinglei's discontentment. In exchange, you think you have what it takes to strike a deal with me? Hu Qinglei faltered slightly before a peculiar look appeared on his face. Do you think I'm unworthy, Brother Hu? Han Li asked. That's right, you don't have what it takes to offer me a deal. You may be more powerful than the average late-nascent soul cultivator, but you're still nothing in my eyes. Do you really think you're my equal just because fellow Taoist Xiang brought you here with him? Besides, what can you possibly offer to tempt me? Oh right, I heard you've got 2 spirit treasures. If I want to, I can simply kill you and take those spirit treasures. Hu Qinglei threatened in a sinister voice. At the same time, a layer of black light surfaced over his body, and it seemed that he really did intend to kill Han Li. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he transmitted voice to Hu Qinglei. Fellow Taoist Xiang must have told you about my spirit treasures, but did he also tell you about my immortal vanquishing beads? Besides, do you really think I handed over all of the information I have regarding the spatial node? Or are you confident that you can capture me alive and use a soul search technique on me despite the immortal vanquishing beads I possess? The menacing look on Hu Qinglei's face changed drastically upon hearing this. He stared intently at Han Li with a cold expression and suddenly fell completely silent. Moments later, Hu Qinglei transmitted his voice to eccentric Wind. Fellow Taoist Wind, does this brat really have an immortal vanquishing bead? Hu Qinglei was using some type of secret technique to transmit his voice without moving his lips, and even Han Li was unable to catch him in the act despite his powerful spiritual sense. Eccentric Wind naturally harbored discontent toward Han Li in his heart, but he certainly wasn't going to deceive Hu Qinglei. As such, after a brief hesitation, he transmitted his voice in response. Not only does this brat have an immortal vanquishing bead, he appears to have more than one. It'll be quite difficult for you to kill him, Brother Hu. Hu Qinglei's expression remained unchanged, but his heart jolted upon hearing that. One immortal vanquishing bead would already be quite troublesome to deal with. If he had more than one, then he posed a substantial threat. However, that wasn't what he was most wary of. With that in mind, Hu Qinglei transmitted his voice to Xianxia and asked, Brother Xiang, did you know that the information he provided about the spatial node may be incomplete? Xianxia transmitted his voice in reply, it makes no difference whether I knew or not. If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't reveal all of the information I had, either. The important thing is that he's agreed to collaborate with us, so he'll naturally reveal all of the information we want to hear over time. I don't care what you do to him, but make sure you leave him alive. Otherwise, I'll be forced to step in. HMPH, but this little brat is displaying such insolence. If I were to back down now, everyone would think that I'm scared of a late-nascent soul cultivator. Hu Qinglei was very displeased. Fellow Taoist Hu, you seem to have become a little foolish from spending so much time in this devil palace of yours. At our cultivation bases, what does it matter what other people think about us? That woman is indeed a fine beauty, but are you going to relinquish an opportunity to pursue immortality just for a concubine? If you really aren't willing to let things slide, then you can teach him a lesson if you'd like. As long as you don't kill him and can ensure that you won't turn him against us, I'll pretend not to see anything, Xianxia replied. Hu Qinglei was silent for a moment before deciding. Looks like I'll have to play the role of the antagonist here then. Let's see if he can offer anything useful in exchange for violet spirit. He then turned to Han Li with a cold expression and said, seeing as you were brought here by fellow Taoist Xiang and fellow Taoist Wind, I'm willing to let things slide. As long as you take back what you said, I can pretend that you had merely misspoken. The threat in his words was very apparent, but he was giving Han Li a chance to bury the hatchet at the same time. All of the nascent soul cultivators in the palace were very surprised to hear this. It was quite clear that this grand elder of the heavenly devil sect really did seem to be rather wary of Han Li. Otherwise, there was no way that he would be willing to afford this opportunity to Han Li. Thus, all of them turned to Han Li with bewilderment on their faces, trying to figure out how he was able to make Hu Qinglei change his mind. Thank you for your generosity, fellow Taoist Hu. Unfortunately, I don't have a habit of taking back the words I've spoken. As such, I'll have to ask you to consider what I said earlier, Han Li replied without any hesitation. Hu Qinglei really was enraged this time. The veins on his forehead bulged as he glowered at Violet Spirit and Han Li, and an astonishing burst of spiritual pressure erupted throughout the palace. His body instantly transformed into a massive vortex, forcing all of the spiritual chi within the palace to converge toward him. All of the nascent soul cultivators stirred as they experienced Hu Qinglei's unfathomable power, and the same thought flashed through their minds. It appeared that he had well and truly been enraged, and was about to attack Han Li. With that in mind, the cultivators who were seated close to Han Li glanced at one another before rising to their feet and retreating a few steps. No one wanted to be caught up in a battle between the two of them, should one eventuate. Even though Violet's spirit had reached the nascent soul stage, she was naturally unable to withstand the devastating spiritual pressure being exerted by a deity transformation cultivator. As such, her exquisite features immediately paled as she stumbled back a couple of steps toward Han Li's table. A warm yet firm hand appeared on her shoulder, injecting a burst of extremely pure magic power into her body. Violet's spirit felt a surge of warmth circulate through her entire body, following which the spiritual pressure that had been as unbearable as a glacial storm a moment ago suddenly felt like nothing more than a gentle spring breeze to her. She reflexively turned her head to discover Han Li's hand resting on her shoulder as he gave her a reassuring smile. She didn't know why Han Li could remain so calm in this situation, but the uneasiness in her heart miraculously vanished at the sight of his smile. She bit down on her lower lip before returning his smile as a faint blush appeared on her face. Upon seeing this, Hu Qinglei was enraged to the point of laughter as he abruptly withdrew his powerful spiritual pressure. He, if you really want her that badly, then I'm willing to strike a deal with you. In exchange for Violet Spirit's freedom, I'll accept your 2 spirit treasures. All of the other cultivators cast surreptitious glances at one another upon hearing this. In their eyes, Hu Qinglei was clearly unwilling to release Violet Spirit. Otherwise, why would he state such an absurd condition? Spirit treasures were the most powerful and rarest treasures in the human world, and countless lives had been lost during battles for these treasures. Even the average great cultivator would be lucky to have 1 or 2 spirit treasure replicas in their possession. Yet Hu Qinglei was asking for 2 spirit treasures in exchange for Violet Spirit's freedom. He was clearly not displaying any sincerity at all. But then again, it was already quite surprising that Hu Qinglei hadn't simply attacked Han Li right away. What was even more surprising to everyone was that Han Li possessed 2 spirit treasures. It was no wonder that he was able to wreak such havoc in the yin-sifting sect on his own, and it appeared that he wasn't lying when he had proclaimed that the master of the yin-sifting sect had fallen by his hands. All of the nascent soul cultivators were discussing spiritedly among themselves, while Violet Spirit's face had turned deathly pale after hearing this condition. She was naturally also aware of just how valuable spirit treasures were, and she knew that there was no way anyone would agree to such a ridiculous exchange. As expected, Han Li heaved a faint sigh and refused. It's clearly unrealistic for me to offer my spirit treasures in this exchange, fellow Taoist Hu. Please forgive me, but I must turn you down. Then your immortal vanquishing beads will also suffice, Hu Qinglei chuckled coldly. Han Li's brows furrowed as he shook his head and replied, I can't hand over my immortal vanquishing beads either. Even if I was willing to offer those beads, I'm afraid that I would be completely at your mercy without them. It seems that you do know your place after all, but aside from your spirit treasures and immortal vanquishing beads, what else can you offer to me? I've lived for over 1,000 years, and even if there were still some things that could tempt me in this human world, there's no way that they would be in your possession. Hu Qinglei scoffed with a deriding look. Really now? I beg to differ. May I ask how many years of your lifespan still remain? Han Li asked with a chuckle. Even though I'm in the twilight phase of my life, it would still be no issue for me to live another 300 to 400 years. Why do you ask? Hu Qinglei was rather taken aback by this question. A mysterious look appeared on Han Li's face after receiving this reply. His lips tremored as he began to transmit his voice rather than continuing to communicate through direct speech. If I gave you a chance to extend your lifespan by another 400 to 500 years, would you be willing to release Violet Spirit, fellow Taoist Hu? 400 to 500 years. Are you referring to the returning sun water? The deriding sneer on Hu Qinglei's face was abruptly wiped away as he unconsciously sat up straighter with a look of rapt focus in his eyes. Eccentric Wind was unable to hear the contents of their voice transmission conversation, but he was quite surprised to see Hu Qinglei's vehement reaction. Xianxia also opened his eyes at the same time, as he turned to Hu Qinglei with a befuddled look. Only then did Hu Qinglei realize that he had let his emotions get the better of himself. Thus, he immediately recomposed his expression as he continued to transmit his voice to Han Li. The returning sun water is the only spirit medicine in the human world that can extend one's lifespan to such an extent. Do you really possess such an extraordinary medicine? If so, I would be more than willing to release violet spirit, and I can even offer you some additional benefit in exchange. Letter 1D453, letter 1D45F, letter 1D452, letter 1D626, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D452, letter 1D4B, 8, letter 1D630, letter 1D45A. Hu Qinglei's voice had become extremely warm and earnest, as if he had become a completely different person. I don't have any returning sun water, but I do have glacial quintessence, which is one of the main ingredients required to refine returning sun water, Han Li replied in a truthful manner. Only glacial quintessence. A hint of disappointment had crept into Hu Qinglei's voice. He felt as he Han Li had thrown him onto an emotional roller coaster. If I really did have returning sun water, why would I offer you a deal? I could just give it to either one of senior martial brother Xiang or fellow Taoist Wind, and they would definitely be willing to forcibly rescue violet spirit for me. I'm sure that you know the refinement method for returning sun water, even though pure sun flame essence is quite difficult to find. A sect as powerful as your heavenly devil sect still has a very high chance of being able to source some. I believe this is a fair exchange, won't you agree, brother Hu? Han Li proposed in a confident voice. Deity transformation cultivators like Hu Qinglei, a spirit medicine that could extend their lifespans, was definitely much more tempting than a spirit treasure or two. As such, Han Li was sure that Hu Qinglei would agree to this exchange. If he didn't possess such an item, it really would be quite difficult for him to rescue violet spirit. Of course, he only dared to mention this item as he could already tell that Hu Qinglei was rather wary of him. Otherwise, revealing the fact that he possessed glacial quintessence would only be giving Hu Qinglei another reason to kill and rob him. Hu Qinglei fell into a period of silent contemplation after hearing Han Li's proposal. Eccentric Wind and Xianxia glanced at one another, and they could see their own surprise mirrored in each other's eyes. Neither of them knew what Hu Qinglei had discussed with Han Li, but it was quite apparent that Hu Qinglei's rage had been completely quelled. All of the other nascent soul cultivators were also very curious, but none of them dared to ask any questions. According to my knowledge, glacial quintessence is something that can only be found at the North Night Palace. If it weren't for the fact the North Night Palace had a deity transformation cultivator among their ranks in the past, and that pure sun flame essence is extremely difficult to find, their glacial quintessence would have been forcibly taken long ago. The North Night Palace has since lost its deity transformation cultivator, but their glacial quintessence also disappeared many years ago. I had infiltrated the North Night Palace in person to search for it, but was unable to find it. Where did you get this glacial quintessence? Could it be the very same vial that the North Night Palace had lost? Hu Qinglei interrogated. And Li seemed to have predicted that Hu Qinglei would ask him such a question, and he replied, "Of course not. How could there be such an unlikely coincidence? I was only able to obtain some glacial quintessence from the myriad-year profound Jade in the profound Jade cave of the North Night Palace's Spirit Void Hall. I won't be handing over all of it during this exchange either, but there should be enough to make 2 portions of returning sun water." At this point, Hu Qinglei suddenly ceased transmitting his voice and spoke for everyone to hear. "HMPH, I don't care where you got this item from. Excessive consumption of this item will only be detrimental anyway, so I don't need any more than the bare minimum. However, if you want to offer this item in exchange for Violet Spirit's freedom, then I have another condition. If you agree to my condition, then I'll release Violet Spirit." "What's your condition?" A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes. He wasn't expecting Hu Qinglei to impose another condition. Hu Qinglei took a cold glance at Violet Spirit before replying. "It's quite simple. Aside from giving me the item that you promised, you also have to take a single attack from me without evading nor using your immortal vanquishing beads. If you can do that, then you have yourself a deal." Xianxia's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but he quickly recomposed himself again. In contrast, Eccentric Wind was looking at Hu Qinglei with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Everyone else also wore contrasting expressions. Hu Qinglei's drastic change in attitude was already quite perplexing to everyone. All of them were wondering what kind of treasure Han Li could possibly be offering to elicit such a strong reaction from a deity transformation cultivator. However, after hearing the additional condition that Hu Qinglei was imposing, everyone was even more befuddled. Han Li's pupils contracted as he repeated for confirmation, "I have to take an attack from you, and I'm not allowed to evade. That's right, that's my condition. If I don't teach you a lesson, everyone will think that anyone can just take my concubines away from me as they please. Hu Qinglei replied in a sinister voice. The entire palace fell silent once again as many fell into deep thought. Could it be that Hu Qinglei was trying to kill Han Li, after all? The disparity between a nascent soul cultivator and a deity transformation cultivator was an extremely drastic one. If Han Li were prohibited from evading, how was he supposed to be able to survive an attack from Hu Qinglei? With that in mind, everyone turned their attention toward Han Li, and Violet Spirit's face paled even further. After a brief silence, she suddenly gritted her teeth and said in a bitter voice, "There's no need for you to do this, Brother Han. I've changed my mind. I want to stay here in the Devil Palace. You can leave on your own, Brother Han." Han Li faltered upon hearing this before quickly gleaning her intentions. However, before he had a chance to say anything in response, Hu Qinglei interjected in a cold voice, "Do you think my Devil Palace is an inn where you can come and go as you please? I've already agreed to this deal, so you can't stay here even if you want to. You won't turn down my condition again, will you, fellow Taoist Han?" Han Li shook his head with a nonchalant expression and replied, "If it's just one attack, then I really do want to give it a shot." Hu Qinglei chuckled as he lifted a hand and pointed a finger toward Violet Spirit. All of a sudden, she was struck by a numb yet itchy sensation in her dantian, and she let loose an involuntary cry. Her lithe and graceful figure swayed as several black threads emerged from within her body, disappearing into Hu Qinglei's finger after circling through the air like a group of miniature spirit snakes. Only then did Violet Spirit stand up straight again, and her expression lit up with surprise and elation as she felt her magic power circulating throughout her body. She had been unable to use her spiritual power before, but it was now gushing into her meridians. Han Li also swept his spiritual sense toward Violet Spirit upon seeing this, and a content look appeared on his face a few moments later. The restriction within her body had indeed ceased to exist. "Hand it over." As soon as he lifted the restriction in Violet Spirit's body, Hu Qinglei turned to Han Li with a cold expression. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he abruptly raised a hand, following which a streak of white light shot forth from within his sleeve. Hu Qinglei's eyes lit up as he made a grabbing motion, drawing the streak of white light into his hand. The white light receded to reveal a white jade vial. Hu Qinglei swept a sleeve gently over the vial, and the lid flew off of its own accord. At the same time, rings of black light began to proliferate through the air, creating a black light barrier that prevented others from being able to ascertain the contents of the jade vial with their spiritual sense. The precautionary measures that Hu Qinglei was taking made everyone even more curious, and even Xianxia had fallen into deep thought as he stroked his beard absent-mindedly. A few moments later, Hu Qinglei had verified that it was indeed glacial quintessence that was stored within the vial, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He replaced the lid of the vial before flipping his hand over, following which the vial completely disappeared. After doing all that, he raised his head to turn his gaze toward Han Li again. The smile on his face faded, only to be replaced by a menacing expression. All of a sudden, black light flashed around his body, and he abruptly transformed into a streak of black light as he flew out of the palace, leaving only a cold parting sentence in his wake. "I'll be waiting for you, autist Han brat. Don't make me wait too long." Before he had finished his sentence, the streak of black light had already disappeared into the distance, but his voice continued to echo throughout the palace. Han Li did not appear to be flustered in the slightest in the face of the daunting task that awaited him. He poured a cup of wine for himself in a leisurely manner, drinking it in a few sips before rising to his feet with a calm and collected expression. In contrast, Violet Spirit's brows were furrowed with concern as she asked, "Brother Han, are you really going to take an attack from him? He's a deity transformation cultivator." "Don't worry if it's just one attack, then I have a good deal of confidence in myself," Han Li replied with a calm and reassuring smile. He had managed to withstand an attack from the avatar of an elder devil even prior to reaching the late nascent soul stage, so he was relatively confident in his ability to take an attack from a deity transformation cultivator. "Then allow me to come with you, Brother Han. I want to support you," Violet Spirit insisted with a determined look in her eyes. Han Li hesitated momentarily at the sight of her resolute expression, before nodding in the end. Spiritual light flashed over his body as he latched onto Violet Spirit's hand, and the two of them hurtled out of the palace as a streak of azure light. All of the other nascent soul cultivators also flooded out of the palace. They certainly weren't going to miss out on such a spectacular matchup. Even the other two gorgeous female cultivators who were set to become King Lei's concubines made their way out of the palace, with the other servants following a brief hesitation. All of a sudden, Xianxia and eccentric Wind were the only ones left in the palace. The two of them sat in silence, seemingly completely disinterested in joining everyone else. "Brother Xiang, what do you think about this?" eccentric Wind asked. "What do I think about what?" Xianxia responded expressionlessly. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D490, letter 1D4AT. The treasure that Han Brat offered, of course. What could he have offered to draw such a strong reaction from fellow Taoist who? There aren't many things in this world that can tempt him to such an extent, eccentric Wind chuckled coldly. "It's just as you said, such treasures are rare but certainly not non-existent, so what's there to be surprised about?" Xianxia remained quite calm. "Brother Xiang, are you really not interested in knowing what such a treasure was? It has to be something that could be very useful to us as well," eccentric Wind said in a meaningful voice. Xianxia heaved a faint sigh and replied, "So what even if that treasure was something that could help us break through our current bottlenecks or prolong our lifespans for another few centuries? Do you think making a breakthrough now will allow us to ascend to the spirit realm? Or do you think that we'll be able to progress to the late deity transformation stage after a few more centuries of cultivation? If not, then there's no point in distracting ourselves with such inconsequential matters. We should instead be focusing solely on searching for a spatial node. You and I will have a chance at attaining immortality as long as we can find a suitable spatial node. Everything else is trivial in comparison." Following a brief period of contemplation, a wry smile appeared on eccentric Wind's face as he said, "You're right, Brother Xiang. I was led astray by my greed there. In reality, regardless of what that treasure was, there's no chance that we'd be able to get our hands on it now that it's in fellow Taoist Hu's possession. In any case, it appears that he has no intention of disclosing what the treasure was to anyone. I'm more concerned now that he asked that Han Brat to take an attack of his. He's not trying to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Han Li, is he? It'll be fine. I already warned fellow Taoist Hu against killing Han Li earlier. Besides, Junior Marshal Brother Han must be quite confident in his own abilities. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to this condition. Having said that, fellow Taoist Hu has always been quite volatile and unpredictable, so we should still go and have a look in case any mishaps arise. It'll be really bad for us if he hurts Han Li in a moment of madness." With that in mind, Xianxia's brows furrowed, and he suddenly wasn't as calm and collected as he was before. Eccentric Wind nodded in agreement, as he also rose to his feet. The two of them swayed in unison, before abruptly disappearing on the spot. In the next instant, the two of them had appeared outside the palace before vanishing again in a flash. A short while later, the two of them stopped some distance away from the palace. High up in their air, over 1,000 feet away from them, Han Li and King Lei were already facing off against one another. Both of them were completely calm and expressionless. There were many cultivators spectating from down below, and hundreds of beautiful Devil Palace female servants had flocked out from the other palaces nearby. All of them were discussing spiritedly among themselves, with excitement etched on their faces. It was no wonder that they were so excited. Seeing the master of the Devil Palace himself in action was quite a rare occasion, even for them. Eccentric Wind looked on with narrowed eyes before suddenly turning to Xianxia as he asked, "Do you think that Han Brat will be able to withstand the attack if fellow Taoist Hu uses his full power?" "That'll depend on what fellow Taoist Hu wants to do. If it's just an ordinary attack, then he'll have no issues withstanding it. However, if he's willing to sacrifice part of his lifespan to use that spirit treasure of his, then Junior Marshal Brother Han will be in some trouble. Fellow Taoist Hu most likely won't do something so foolish, though," Xianxia replied with furrowed brows. "Your analysis is spot on, as usual, Brother Xiang, but you may not have heard about this yet. Fellow Taoist Hu recently obtained a treasure that's apparently no less powerful than a spirit treasure. However, this treasure requires the usage of a special secret technique before it can be activated. As long as fellow Taoist Hu injects some of his magic power into the treasures, it'll be capable of unleashing unfathomable might. I think there's a very good chance that he'll use that treasure," eccentric Wind chuckled. "Is that so?" Xianxia's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. Just as Xianxia and eccentric wind were conversing with one another, the two people locked in a confrontation in the air above finally sprang into action. Qinglei swept a sleeve through the air, and a ball of green light shot forth before transforming into an object that hovered in front of him. It was an antiquated scroll with peculiar green light shimmering over its surface, striking one with a sense of mystery. Qinglei aimed a cold glance at Han Li, before suddenly making a hand seal as he began to chant something. The scroll slowly began to unfurl amid his chanting voice. A ball of green light began to flash incessantly as the scroll was spread open, revealing a piece of gorgeous scenic artwork containing around a dozen or so green mountains of different sizes. However, before anyone had a chance to catch a clear glimpse of the artwork, a burst of green mist rose up from the scroll, instantly obscuring the contents of the entire scroll. A series of sharp cries rang out, following which 18 pillars of green light rose into the air. An incredible turn of events unfolded. The pillars of light receded after hurtling into the air, each of them transforming into a miniature mountain around 10 feet tall. All of them were of a beautiful shade of green and abundant with spiritual qi. The sharp cries were coming from none other than those miniature mountains. Han Li was quite startled by this development. The slightly lackadaisical expression on his face was replaced by a serious one as he immediately flipped his hands over. A green wooden ruler and a miniature azure cauldron appeared over his palms. He tossed the wooden ruler before him, upon which the projection of a lotus flower instantly appeared. The projection swelled drastically in size, transforming into a massive silver lotus that positioned itself in front of him. Meanwhile, the wooden ruler was slowly rotating at the center of the lotus flower, shimmering with dazzling green light. Almost at the exact same moment, Han Li flicked a finger toward the azure cauldron, flinging the cauldron's lid off. A clear ringing sound erupted as a clump of thin azure threads shot forth from within. Amid a vast expanse of shimmering azure light, the thin threads transformed into a massive net over 100 feet in size, descending from the sky to shield Han Li. The heaven-void cauldron itself had also expanded to several feet in size as it flew into the air overhead. Han Li then made a hand seal and golden light flashed over his body. A shiny golden light barrier that clung tightly to his clothes was immediately materialized. This was none other than the Buddhist Vajra barrier. After setting up his most powerful 3 lines of defense, Han Li was feeling a lot more secure and assured. Upon seeing this, Qinglei said in a cold voice, "Seeing as you're prepared, I won't delay any longer either." Right as his voice trailed off, he let loose a low cry and made a hand seal. A pillar of black light was blasted out of his mouth before disappearing into the green mist. He was furiously injecting his spiritual power into the scroll. A dull rumbling sound rang out as the green mist surged and tumbled violently. Immediately thereafter, 18 pillars of black light shot straight up into the air, injecting themselves into the 18 miniature mountains up above. All of those mountains instantly began radiating scintillating green light while expanding at an alarming rate. Within the span of just a few breaths, they had transformed into colossal objects around 500 to 600 feet tall, turning them into 18 true mountain peaks. The sharp cries they were emitting became even more pronounced as a series of apes appeared on the mountains, each of which was around a foot in size. All of the cultivators down below were in awe of the scenes unfolding up above. Violet Spirit was also growing even more concerned. "Go!" Black Chi flashed over Qinglei's face as he grabbed the air, sending a small mountain hurtling toward Han Li. After grabbing at the air several times in quick succession, 7 or 8 mountains had already lined up and were preparing to throw themselves at Han Li one after another. A normal nascent soul cultivator definitely wouldn't be able to withstand an attack from even one of those mountains, let alone 7 or 8. There were still around 10 mountains left, yet Qinglei merely exhaled and left them where they were. Perhaps it was because he was simply trying to teach Han Li, yet didn't want to actually endanger his life. Or perhaps it was because activating all 18 mountains required excessive magic power expenditure. In any case, Qinglei displayed no intention of attacking with the rest of his mountains. Han Li was slightly dumbstruck. He knew that Qinglei would definitely make full use of this opportunity to unleash one of his most powerful attacks, but he didn't think he would hurl a few mountains directly at him. Setting aside whether these mountains possessed any special abilities, just the sheer enormity of the impact they would create was unfathomable. Even with his spirit treasures protecting him, There was definitely no way that he would be able to withstand so many devastating strikes in succession. If it weren't for their prior agreement, he could easily unleash a movement technique to evade these mountains. However, he had no choice now but to stand still on the spot and act as Hu Qinglei's punching bag. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face, but a thought then suddenly occurred to him as he abruptly patted a spirit beast pouch hanging from his waist. A burst of black light instantly shot forth from within, transforming into a small black monkey that was only several inches in size. It was none other than the Weeping Soul Beast. At the same time, he flapped his other sleeve through the air to summon a small black vial. The vial tipped itself over and 5 humanoid skeletons emerged from within amid a burst of grayish-white energy. These were none other than the unbroken Sink Devils. Han Li then quickly made a hand seal, and black light began to surge over the small monkey's body. The monkey expanded at a rapid rate, instantly transforming into a colossal ape over 300 feet tall. The massive ape pounded its chest with its mountainous fists as it let loose a long, thunderous cry. It then harumphed violently, and a large swath of yellow light swept out of its nose, converging to form a massive yellow trident. With its trident in hand, the ape was like a fiend celestial that had just descended upon the human world. Meanwhile, the 5 sets of humanoid skeletons were also converging, combining to form a massive bone saber-wielding skeleton that was comparable in size to the giant ape. The 2 colossal creatures stood side by side, one on Han Li's left and the other on his right. Almost at the exact same moment, the first mountain came crashing down with devastating might. Before Han Li had even done anything, the skeleton and giant ape sprang into action at the same time. The ape drew a sharp inhalation as it raised its trident into the air to try and parry the mountain, while the skeleton raised its 2 bone sabers at once before slashing them viciously toward the air overhead in a cross-slash strike. 2 resounding booms erupted as all types of spiritual light intertwined and exploded. The giant ape and the skeleton were both forced downward, yet they managed to arrest their downward momentum after their weapons struck the mountain overhead, stopping it cold in its tracks. However, Han Li had just pulled out his trifling fan, and there was no joy in his expression upon seeing this. A few more thunderous booms erupted as a few more mountains descended, stacking on top of the first one. As such, even the ridiculously powerful skeleton and Weeping Soul Beast were unable to withstand this overwhelming assault any longer. Following 3 rumbling booms, the massive ape's body shuddered as the huge yellow trident in its hands was shattered into countless pieces. At the same time, the ape itself shrank drastically amid a ball of black light, reverting back to only around 10 feet tall. Without the assistance of the massive ape, the skeleton was plunged into an even more dire situation. As the 4th mountain arrived, the twin bone sabers in the skeleton's hands were snapped in half, and 4 mountains came crashing down mercilessly in a doomsday-like scene. Even the violent skeleton was struck by a sense of fear at the sight of this insurmountable attack. Han Li's heart jolted as he raised his trifling fan, preparing to lash out with it. However, right at this moment, a startling sequence of events unfolded. Following a dull thump, the giant skeleton let loose an almighty roar of rage as they blasted out a torrent of 5-colored flames, striking the base of the mountain on the bottom. A vast expanse of 5-colored light exploded, and the speed of the mountain's descent was dramatically slowed to less than a tenth of its original pace. However, the mountains behind the bottom were unaffected by the 5-colored flames, and they continued to pile on more pressure. An earth-shattering boom erupted as the 4 mountains crashed into one another, resulting in an enormous explosion of green light that made it appear as if a green sun had risen into the air. Beneath this immense expanse of green light, 5-colored flames were surging relentlessly, as if they were supporting the green sun in the sky. The combination of the 2 presented an extremely marvelous spectacle to behold. Han Li was a little flabbergasted. He knew that the 5 glacial flames could be combined to conjure up some kind of strange ability, but he didn't know that it would be this astonishingly powerful. In the distance, Hu Qinglei's expression darkened upon seeing this, and 2 more mountains plunged themselves into the green light at his behest. On this occasion, an even more ferocious boom rang out. The spatial fluctuations nearby twisted and warped as the green sun came crashing down with renewed vigor. In contrast, the 5-colored flames shuddered violently before being forced to dissipate into specks of 5-colored light. However, Han Li had already prepared himself for this situation, and the massive skeleton immediately fled as 5 bursts of grayish-white chi. The cry of a phoenix then rang out as a 3-colored fire raven erupted from the triflame fan, crashing directly into the descending green sun. A vast expanse of light exploded once again, as the three-colored light slowed the green sun downward momentum this time. However, as the two bursts of light intertwined in the sky, it was quite clear that the three-colored flames were inferior in power, and were forced to descend along with the green sun. Han Li's eyes flashed as he pointed toward the small azure cauldron overhead. The green net of threads that was initially protecting transformed into an azure spirit cloud, before rushing into the air above. With the assistance of this azure cloud, the three-colored flames were finally able to keep the green sun at bay. However, as two more mountains came crashing down into the green light one after another, the green sun was able to slowly reinitiate its descent. Han Li took a deep breath as he swept his sleeve toward the silver lotus flower before him. The massive lotus flower swayed before vanishing on the spot. However, in the next instant, seven-colored Buddhist light flashed as the silver lotus flower appeared once again. Meanwhile, the small green ruler at the center of the lotus flower began to rotate as the lotus flower expanded drastically once again. Even after doing all that, Han Li displayed no intention of stopping. Instead, he rubbed his hands together before raising them high into the air. Two explosive thunderclaps erupted as two arcs of light shot forth from within his sleeves, each of which was as thick as his arm. The two arcs of lightning converged to form a massive golden python with a diameter comparable to that of a large bowl, flying directly up into the air at an alarming speed. At the same time, Han Li opened his mouth to expel a glittering and translucent bead, which instantly transformed into a purple worm over 100 feet long that also threw itself into the air above. Meanwhile, the massive silver lotus was also slowly rising up to meet the green sun. Spiritual light suddenly flashed in the air as the green sun overhead split up into 8 jade peaks again. However, 4 of them were already damaged and incompletely, while the other 4 were in perfect condition. However, as green light began to surge along the surfaces of these mountains, an incredible transformation took place. The 8 mountains converged, and as opposed to simply stacking on top of one another, they truly combined to form a gargantuan mountain close to 10,000 feet tall, which came crashing down without any delay. At this moment, the purple worm, lightning python, and silver lotus flower had also risen up to meet this colossal mountain. Spiritual light of all types of colors exploded as lightning, glacial chi, silver light, and green light intertwined, and the colossal mountain really did pause in its tracks. However, the sheer size of the mountain was simply too much to handle. Regardless of whether it was struck by lightning or frozen by glacial chi, the mountain seemed to simply be able to shrug off those afflictions as it slowly continued downward. Even the massive silver lotus was unable to arrest its momentum. Down below, Han Li narrowed his eyes as blue light flashed through his pupils. He then let loose a low cry and threw up a mouthful of blood essence. The blood essence immediately disappeared into the center of the silver lotus flower in the sky, where it was absorbed by the green ruler. Han Li rapidly made a series of hand seals, as he began to chant an unintelligible string of incantations. Upon hearing Han Li's chanting, Xianxia and eccentric Wind both looked at one another with surprise etched on their faces. Just as the colossal mountain overhead was about to crush the silver lotus flower, 8 different types of sharp cries suddenly erupted from the green wooden ruler, following which 8 projections emerged, each of which was around an inch in size. At Han Li's behest, all of these projections expanded drastically, transforming into 8 spirit beast projections over 100 feet in size in the blink of an eye. All of the projections were shimmering with green light, and they appeared to be substantial creatures rather than mere projected illusions. Furthermore, each and every one of those projections was identical to one of the legendary heavenly spirit beasts. All 8 of those projections combined their powers to force the colossal mountain up above to a grinding halt, forcing it to only be able to rotate on the spot, but not allowing it to descend so much as a single inch further. Hu Qinglei's expression finally darkened upon seeing this. Letter 1D68F, letter 1D42B, letter 1D68T, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D568, letter 1D41E. Letter 1D554, letter 1D428, letter 1D5FA. Even though he didn't intend to kill Han Li, he really did want to severely wound Han Li in order to teach him a lesson. If Han Li were able to withstand his attack with such ease, then he would be squandering this opportunity. With that in mind, Hu Qinglei appeared to have done nothing, but all of the sharp cries being emitted by the jade peaks suddenly increased in volume at his behest. Countless gray figures shot forth from those mountains, transforming into powerful apes that were each around 10 feet in length. These apes weren't actual demon beasts, but instead projections refined by this treasure through sacrificing demon souls. As such, they were virtually unkillable, and as they threw themselves down from above, even if they were sliced into countless pieces, they could resurrect themselves almost immediately from the Jade Peaks. Even though none of them were very powerful individually, they were still very troublesome to deal with nonetheless. However, as soon as these ape projections appeared, the Weeping Soul Beast's eyes suddenly lit up. It let loose a long cry of its own, as its body began to expand drastically once again amid a swath of black light. However, on this occasion, it only swelled to just over 100 feet in size before letting loose a violent harumph. Bursts of yellow light swept forth from its nostrils, transforming into several hundred streaks of yellow light that shot forth into the air. All of the apes summoned by the Jade Peaks possessed abundant demonic chi, and almost all of them were at the 5th grade or above. In fact, there were even a few that appeared to be at the pinnacle of the 7th grade. However, as soon as the streaks of yellow light swept through them, they were all immediately felled like ants, having been reduced to wisps of green light before being swept away by the yellow light. All of those wisps of green light were then swallowed into the Weeping Soul Beast's cavernous mouth. Hundreds of ape projections were sucked into the Weeping Soul Beast's belly in an instant. However, after engulfing all of those ape projections, it shrank once again before disappearing into a spirit beast pouch hanging from Han Li's waist as a streak of black light. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, but he was informed through his spiritual sense connection with the Weeping Soul Beast that it was going to evolve again, and that was naturally fantastic news to him. However, not only were all of the spectating cultivators stunned by the sight of the Weeping Soul Beast devouring so many ape projections at once, even Hu Qinglei himself was rooted to the spot. Other people may have been unaware of just how powerful those ape projections were, but Hu Qinglei was the owner of the treasure that had summoned them, so he was naturally well aware of how troublesome they were. As such, he was much more astonished than everyone else was to witness this turn of events. Meanwhile, the colossal mountain in the sky had finally been forced to a complete standstill by the combined powers of the 8 spirit beast projections. Han Li's eyes were slightly narrowed as he looked up at the mountain overhead, wondering if she'd use some other treasure to completely destroy this mountain. All of a sudden, Xianxia suddenly interjected, "Haha, Junior Martial Brother Han and fellow Taoist who really are forces to be reckoned with. Let's end things here for now. If you two continue, I'm afraid that this will escalate into a full-blown battle." His body swayed as he disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, he appeared between Han Li and Hu Qinglei, reaching out toward the massive green mountain with a single hand, seemingly in a casual and nonchalant gesture. A loud boom erupted as a ghostly claw that was embroiled in black chi abruptly appeared in the air. The ghostly claw obscured virtually the entire sky as it grabbed onto the massive mountain, lifting it over 100 feet as the claws tightened. Han Li stirred upon seeing Xianxia's ability, while Hu Qinglei's expression darkened even further. "HMPH, I didn't think that you'd already reached such a high level of proficiency in your giant spirit claws, fellow Taoist Xiang, but why are you displaying this ability now? Are you trying to exert dominance over me?" Hu Qinglei interrogated in a cold voice. Xianxia was completely unfazed by Hu Qinglei's menacing expression as he smiled nonchalantly. "My giant spirit claws are merely an insignificant trick. I wouldn't dream of showing it off to you, Brother Hu. I was simply concerned that you'd get caught up into the heat of battle and forget your agreement with Junior Martial Brother Han. You said you were only going to unleash a single attack. I believe Junior Martial Brother Han has already withstood that attack. Am I right?" Hu Qinglei gritted his teeth before reluctantly replying, "Of course I wouldn't revoke my agreement with a nascent soul cultivator. Fellow Taoist Han has indeed satisfied my condition." He then raised a hand and waved it toward the colossal mountain. A ringing sound immediately erupted from the mountain, amid a flash of brilliant green light. Xianxia smiled, and the massive claws clenched around the mountain immediately disappeared. The colossal mountain then shuddered before reverting back to 8 separate mountains, each of which was around 1,000 feet tall. At the same time, the 8 mountains shrank drastically before hovering over to the scroll. By then, they had already been reduced to several inches in size, and all of them disappeared into the artwork on the scroll. The 10 remaining Jade Peaks hovering above Hu Qinglei's head underwent the same process, disappearing into the scroll one after another. The scroll then slowly rolled itself up again, and as the green light faded, it transformed into a completely mundane-looking scroll once again. Hu Qinglei reached out, and the scroll disappeared into his sleeve as a ball of green light. Hu Qinglei turned his gaze toward Han Li and Xianxia, and a warm smile appeared on his face, as if nothing had ever happened. Even though I've released Violet Spirit, I'll still be holding a ceremony for my other 2 concubines in 3 days. You'll be staying to attend the ceremony, won't you, Brother Xiang? Xianxia was not surprised by this change of attitude at all, and a wide smile also appeared on his face as he replied, "Of course. I've already offered up a congratulatory present, so I definitely have to stay for a few more cups of wine." There were countless thoughts racing through Han Li's mind, but his expression remained unchanged as replied, "Senior Martial Brother Xiang and fellow Taoist Wind haven't left yet, so I'll naturally be staying to attend the ceremony as well." "Haha, that's great. Let's go back to my palace and drink to our heart's content, fellow Taoists." Hu Qinglei chortled heartily before flying directly toward his palace as a streak of black light. All of the cultivators down below were still reminiscing the epic clash they had just witnessed, and they could only hurriedly follow Hu Qinglei back to the Devil Palace. Eccentric Wind also set off to return to the palace, leaving only the stunned and elated Violet Spirit remaining behind on the ground down below. "We should go as well, Junior Martial Brother Han. You can rest assured, fellow Taoist who is a man of his word. You've satisfied his condition, so this chapter has been flipped over as far as he's concerned, and he won't look for another excuse to try and get back at you. You can stay with this girl at the Devil Palace for a few days and enjoy each other's company." Xianxia chuckled before heading toward the palace himself. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he shook his head as he slowly descended. "Are you all right, Brother Han?" Violet Spirit immediately rushed over with concern, gratitude, and a myriad of other emotions etched on her face. "I'm fine, just a little energy depleted. Are you planning to leave now or after the ceremony?" Han Li asked. "When are you planning on leaving?" "I'll just go with you, Brother Han," Violet Spirit replied without any hesitation. "In that case, you'll have to stay here for a few more days. I won't be able to leave right away," Han Li sighed. Violet Spirit hesitated momentarily before nodding as she replied, "Indeed, it would be inappropriate to depart now, and you could irk the 3 deity transformation cultivators if you do that. However, it seems that they really are rather wary of you, so I'm sure we should be fine even if we stay here for a few more days." After retaining her freedom, all of Violet Spirit's intelligence and resourcefulness suddenly returned to her, transforming her into the fairy Violet Spirit of old who dared to explore the world on her own. Han Li smiled at the sight of the spark that had returned to her eyes, and he traveled back toward the palace. Violet Spirit looked on at Han Li's departing figure, and a thought seemed to have occurred to her as a faint blush appeared on her face. She bit down on her lower lip before also making her way toward the palace. 3 days, a ceremony was held in the Devil Palace, as the other 2 beautiful female cultivators officially became concubines of Hu Qinglei. Around 20 to 30 additional devilish cultivators and itinerant cultivators arrived for the ceremony, and the even weakest among them were at the mid-nascent soul stage, while a few more late-nascent soul cultivators arrived on the scene. This was quite an eye-opener for Han Li, as there was no way that such a formidable lineup could be assembled in the heavenly south region. All of the newly arrived cultivators were naturally stunned to see the 3 deity transformation cultivators treating Han Li as their equal. However, after hearing from the previous batch of cultivators who had arrived before them about Han Li's epic feats, all of them were even more astonished, and treated Han Li with just as much respect as they extended toward the deity transformation cultivators. After all, this was a man who had single-handedly almost destroyed the Yin-sifting sect, and also taken a concubine from Hu Qinglei before withstanding one of Hu Qinglei's most powerful attacks. This was clearly not someone they could afford to mess with. During these past few days, Hu Qinglei's interactions with Han Li were quite normal, and he made no mention of the incident surrounding Violet Spirit. Han Li was quite relieved that this was the case, but he had still been on high alert for the past 3 days. Violet Spirit didn't dare to stray far away from Han Li, either, and he certainly wasn't going to complain about having such an exquisite beauty by his side. Following the conclusion of the ceremony, Han Li immediately bade farewell to Xianxia and the others, departing from the Devil Palace and the Devil Cliff Mountain with Violet Spirit before both of them seemingly disappeared off the face of this world. 3 months later, on the summit of a nameless scenic mountain, an azure-robed young man was standing peacefully on a huge rock, casting his gaze out toward the distance. This young man was naturally none other than Han Li, who had departed from the Devil Cliff Mountain several months ago. At this moment, his expression was quite calm, but there was a hint of internal turmoil in his eyes. He suddenly raised his hands and silently stared at them for a while. Just a day ago, his hands had been roaming over Violet Spirit's scorching porcelain-like skin, and just the memory of that wonderful experience was making his blood boil. However, Violet Spirit had since departed, leaving him alone on this mountain. After Han Li and Violet Spirit had left the Heavenly Devil Sect, the two of them had settled on this mountain and began exchanging their respective experiences since they had last parted. There had always been a hint of mutual attraction between the two, and after living together in an intimate manner for several months, they were finally unable to hold back their impulsive urges and lost themselves in each other's bodies. However, after the event, Violet Spirit made her thoughts very clear to Han Li. He already had a Tao companion, and she was unwilling to settle for becoming anyone's concubine, so their paths were destined to diverge. However, she would never love any man aside from Han Li, so she won't ever find a Tao companion of her own. Instead, she was planning to dedicate herself wholeheartedly to cultivation as well as her pursuit of the great Tao. After expressing these intentions to Han Li, Violet Spirit left with a calm expression. Han Li was naturally powerful enough to force her to stay, but he could see the determination in her heart, so he chose to let her leave. Now, as he stood on the summit of this mountain, reminiscing about the past 3 months he had spent here with Violet Spirit, he was struck by a sense of dejection and a faint throbbing pain in his heart. He knew that these were signs indicating instability in his state of mind, but he didn't rectify this right away, choosing to bask in this complex emotion instead. After a long while, the sense of loss and conflict slowly disappeared from Han Li's eyes as his pupils regained their clarity. "I guess it simply wasn't meant to be," Han Li murmured to himself. He then transformed into a streak of azure light and rose into the air, disappearing into the distant sky in the blink of an eye. The fiery hell was one of the 7 restricted areas of the Great Jin, located in the southeastern region of the Great Jin, and it had existed since ancient times. This was a land of flames comparable in size to half of an entire state, and there were no other colors to be seen there other than black and red. There were also countless volcanoes of different sizes spread over this vast land that spanned innumerable kilometers. Some of these volcanoes were over 100,000 feet tall, while others were only just over 1,000 feet tall, resembling small hills rather than the volcanoes that they were. Some of these volcanoes were very much active with scorching red lava bubbling within their craters, while some had gone completely dark and extinct. There were also some that were in the process of eruption, rumbling incessantly as scorching lava spewed into their air from their respective craters. The air above this land was always obscured by a thick layer of blackish-red fiery clouds, and the ground around these volcanoes was completely black from the immeasurably deep layers of soot that had gathered over time. At low altitudes, the air was entirely filled with the acrid scent of sulfur, and the air temperature here was far more scorching than in the rest of the world. However, many cultivators would often appear in this lethal land that was uninhabitable for mortals. Some of them occasionally descend from the sky and pick up some things from the ground, while others burrowed straight into the craters of certain volcanoes. Those who dared to enter the volcanoes were naturally all-powerful cultivators of a higher grade. The fiery hell was undoubtedly a perilous place, but it was also a region that was abundant in all types of fire attribute materials. The true restricted area wasn't actually the entire fiery hell. Instead, it was merely referring to a vast stretch of mountain ranges at the center of the fiery hell. In that place, the entire region was enshrouded under a thick red mist that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers. That vast expanse of red mist was the true restricted realm, and very few cultivators emerged alive after entering this restricted area. As such, there usually weren't any cultivators that could be sighted around that area. However, on this day, a streak of azure light could suddenly be seen hurtling toward a certain border of the fiery mist, reaching a distance of just over 1,000 feet away from the crimson mist in the blink of an eye. The azure light receded, and a young male cultivator was revealed. This man was none other than Han Li, who had rectified his state of mind and finally arrived here after several months of traveling. As soon as he appeared, he scanned his gaze throughout his surroundings before turning his attention to the sea of fiery mist. This vast expanse of red mist was quite different from the mist that Han Li had seen in the past. Not only was its enormity downright staggering, it was completely still without detectable swaying nor discernible noises coming from within. Hanli clasped his hands behind his back and stared at the crimson mist for a while. All of a sudden, azure light flashed around his body again as he plunged headfirst into the sea of mist. As soon as he entered the fiery mist, astonishing explosions began to erupt along the protective azure light around his body as it came into contact with the red mist. Red and azure light intertwined with one another, and the explosions became more and more frequent and violently. Hanli was slightly startled by this development, and after flying for over 1,000 feet, his brows furrowed as he abruptly patted a storage pouch hanging from his waist. Red light flashed, and a dozen or so streaks of crimson light shot forth, transforming into a series of glittering and translucent round pillars. Each of these pillars was around a foot in length and was shimmering with red light, with lifelike crimson worm carvings engraved onto their surfaces. These were none other than the treasures that Hanli had refined from the fire dragon pillars he had sourced from the Kunwu Mountains. Hanli began to chant something as he pointed a finger at those red pillars. The pillars revolved in the air before hurtling forth, stopping around 10 feet away from Hanli. Red light flashed, and the crimson worms carved onto the surfaces of these pillars opened their mouths in unison, blasting out bursts of crimson light which combined to form a barrier around Hanli's body. After coming into contact with this red barrier, the fiery mist around him immediately ceased their explosions, and Hanli was able to glide through it like a hot knife through butter. A satisfied look appeared in Hanli's eyes upon seeing this, and he was immediately able to increase his speed by severalfold. Here in this sea of fiery mist, one's spiritual sense was severely restricted, and even with Hanli's immensely powerful spiritual sense, he was only able to detect the situation within a small area around him. If any other late-nascent soul cultivators were in his shoes, they wouldn't most likely be even more inept. As expected, it was a wise decision for him to come here only after reaching the late-nascent soul stage. Hanli was naturally here to source pure sun flame essence that he could use to refine the returning sun water. After using a soul search technique on Master Arctic Dragon's nascent soul in the North Night Palace, he had gleaned some information, telling him that a wisp of pure sun flame essence could be found in this fiery hell-restricted area. However, the pure sun flame essence was hidden in an extremely perilous location, so Hanli wasn't in a hurry to search for it. Only after reaching the pinnacle of the late-nascent soul stage was he confident enough to come searching for it. After all, the returning sun water was an extraordinary medicine that was of the utmost importance to him. He had given Hu Qinglei several drops of glacial quintessence in exchange for Violet Spirit's freedom, but he still had sufficient glacial quintessence to refine 5 or 6 portions of returning sun water. Of course, he would only be able to refine this medicine if he could find the pure sun flame essence, and that would surely be an extremely arduous task. Otherwise, Master Arctic Dragon was also a great cultivator himself, so he would have come here to secure the pure sun flame essence long ago. Hanli already possessed the Gradian True Flame, so it certainly wouldn't be impossible for him to obtain the pure sun flame essence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the risk to come to this place. This vast expanse of fiery mist one of the 7 restricted areas of Great Jin, so it was naturally an extremely perilous place. Furthermore, there were also many unimaginably powerful fire attribute demon beasts inhabiting the mountains down below, among which there was apparently no lack of 6th and 7th grade demons beasts. Even the average nascent soul cultivator would very likely be killed if they were to be surrounded by a dozen or so of these beasts. On top of that, the most dangerous things within this red sea of mist weren't even the demon beasts. Just as these thoughts were running through Hanli's mind, he seemed to have suddenly sensed something, and a cold light flashed through his eyes as he flicked a finger to the side. Golden light flashed as a burst of sword chi disappeared into the red mist. A peculiar cry abruptly rang out. A dark shadow stumbled out of the mist, revealing itself to be a red demon beast several feet in length with a pair of blue eyes and a purple comb on its head. However, there was blood splattered all over one of its wings, and even more blood was gushing violently out of a fist-sized puncture wound. However, this beast was extremely aggressive, and it threw itself at Hanli despite its injuries. That didn't come as any surprise to Hanli. After all, fire attribute demon beasts were commonly much more ferocious and violent than other demon beasts. Hanli heaved a faint sigh before casually flicking 5 of his fingers. 5 red threads shot forth, puncturing several regions of the demon beast body before winding themselves around the bird and tightening violently. Brilliant red light flashed as the demon beast was chopped into several sections. Its body had been severed by none other than Han Li's fire spirit threads. In the face of weaker opponents like this fiery bird, the might of the fire spirit threads was very apparent. Han Li waved a hand through the air, and the red threads flew back toward him before disappearing into his palm. As he continued deeper into the sea of mist, more and more demon beasts began to appear with increasing regularity. Before he knew it, he had slain more than 10 demon beasts. On one occasion, he was attacked by 5 or 6 fire apes at once, each of which was around 10 feet tall. A normal early nascent soul cultivator would have been in some trouble had they been faced with that situation, but Han Li was naturally able to handle the situation with aplomb. He merely opened his mouth to blast forth swords that were several inches in length, and the fire apes were easily slain. However, after forging ahead for a while longer, he finally encountered the first true stumbling block on his journey. In the air several hundred feet away from him, there was a shimmering red ball of light around 10 feet in size that was constantly transforming. It took on the form of a tiger, then a wolf, transitioning between different demon beast forms as if it didn't have a set form of its own. Han Li looked on with a cold expression before abruptly raising a hand, sending several streaks of golden sword chi flying toward it. Golden light flashed past, easily slicing this creature into several pieces, but the segmented red light merely converged once again to revert back to its original form with no issues whatsoever. Han Li's brows furrowed as he made a hand seal. He then abruptly opened his mouth to eject a pillar of purple light, puncturing the ball of light in the blink of an eye to create a hole with a diameter comparable to that of a large bowl. This was a new secret technique that Han Li had mastered after reaching the late nascent soul stage. It involved compressing the purple apex flames that he had refined, then blasting it out of his mouth using his immense spiritual power. As one could imagine, the resulting attack was very fearsome. Even though the ball of light was still able to regenerate itself, it took a lot longer to do so than on the previous occasion. It's just as the rumors say, this malicious fire spirit really is a little troublesome to deal with. Even my glacial flame, which is supposed to hold an attribute advantage over it, isn't very effective. No wonder Master Arctic Dragon's memories suggested that he was quite wary of this creature, Han Li murmured to himself. Right at this moment, the red ball of light took on the form of a crimson devilish ghost and rushed toward Han Li with red flames erupting from its mouth. Han Li adopted a serious expression as he waved a hand through the air. A massive azure hand immediately appeared above the devilish ghost's head, crashing down like lightning before grabbing the ghost firmly between its 5 fingers. Red light flashed as the fingers of the azure hand tightened, crushing the entire body of the devilish ghost. However, the red light converged and regenerated itself again in the next instant. A cold smile appeared on Han Li's face as he patted his storage pouch, seemingly preparing to summon some kind of treasure. However, right at this moment, a crisp cry suddenly rang out from within his body. Crimson light then flashed on his shoulder as a tiny little crimson bird that was only around several inches in size materialized out of thin air. Han Li faltered slightly at the sight of this bird. This bird was none other than the spirit beast manifested from the Gradian true flame. A surprised look appeared on Han Li's face. Before he could ascertain why this fire raven had appeared of its own accord, the latter suddenly spread open its wings and hurtled directly toward the ball of red light. Along the way, the fire raven swelled drastically in size, expanding to several feet in a few flashes as it opened its beak to peck the ball of light. To Han L's surprise, the bird was able to peck a chunk out of the ball of light's insubstantial body. Following just a few more pecks, a large hole had appeared in the ball of light, and it was no longer able to regenerate as it once could. However, this malicious fire spirit didn't appear to be very intelligent, and nor did it seem to have any sense of pain. Instead of trying to flee the scene, it was merely transitioning into different forms over and over again in an attempt to better combat the fire raven. The fire raven had the malicious fire spirit's body grasped tightly between its talons, continuing to peck at it viciously regardless of what form it adopted. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, the ball of light had almost been reduced to half of its original size. Han Li chuckled upon seeing this. Never did he think that the Gradian fire raven would be the bane of the malicious fire spirits here. In that case, he would be spared of a lot of trouble. Thus, Han Li looked on with a relaxed expression. It didn't take long for the Gradian fire raven to completely devour the ball of light. It then let loose a long cry before returning to its perch on Han Li's shoulder, where it began to organize its feathers, seemingly unwilling to return to Han Li's body right away. There was no way that there was only one malicious fire spurt in this sea of mist, so Han Li naturally wasn't going to force the bird back into his body. Thus, he continued onward in his journey. The mountain ranges enshrouded under this sea of mist were truly massive beyond belief. Han Li's spiritual sense was restricted, so he didn't dare to fly too quickly, and it took him 3 full days before he finally arrived at his destination, a massive extinct volcano. Along the way, he had slain at least 70 to 80 demon beasts of all stages, if not over 100. There were even some that had reached the pinnacle of the 7th grade and were only a step away from the 8th grade. 8th grade metamorphosis stage demon beasts would go on to attain intelligence, so they would depart from the fiery hell to find a more suitable place to cultivate. As for malicious fire spirits, Han Li only encountered 2 in total on the way here. Both of them were devoured by the Gradian fire raven, so they didn't cause him much trouble at all. However, as they were passing through a fiery lake along the way, Han Li was forced to slow down significantly. The fiery lake was capable of blasting crimson pillars of fire into the air without any premonition, and those pillars of fire were quite powerful. Han Li wasn't fearful of these flames, but he naturally didn't want to unnecessarily waste his magic power. As such, he exercised a policy of caution and slowly flew over this area. At this moment, Han Li was already standing on the rim of the extinct volcano, casting his gaze up ahead with his arms crossed in front of his chest. He patted a storage pouch on his waist, and a thick stack of formation flags and formation plates immediately appeared in his hand. He tossed those formation tools behind him, and silver light flashed as another, Han Li, emerged. The second Han Li raised a hand to summon a swath of silver light, which allowed it to catch all of the formation tools that had been flung into the air. The second Han Li was none other than the humanoid puppet, which was being controlled by Han Li's second nascent soul. The puppet's body swayed, and it transformed into a silver streak of light, disappearing into the mist in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Han Li sat down to meditate with his legs crossed and his eyes closed. A short while later, the humanoid puppet arrived back by his side, completely empty-handed. Han Li opened his eyes and turned his gaze toward the puppet before nodding his head. The puppet swayed before vanishing once again. Brilliant spiritual light erupted over Han Li's body as he hurtled through the air as a streak of azure light. Following a few flashes, he had arrived at the very center of the volcanic crater, upon which the azure light receded. Han Li inspected his surroundings before raising his hand, tossing out a white object that he had prepared in advance. The object revolved in the air before swelling drastically amid a ball of spiritual light, transforming into a massive object over 100 feet tall before crashing to the ground, causing the entire earth to tremor slightly. It appeared to be an extremely heavy object. As the white light faded, a small jade sacrificial pillar was revealed. However, there were runes carved over the surface of this altar, clearly indicating that it was already a treasure. Han Li flipped his hand over again, and a small blue cauldron appeared over his palm. He then began to chant something as he cast several incantation seals onto the cauldron. The cauldron revolved and began to radiate scintillating spiritual light. At the same, it swelled dramatically to around 10 feet in size. Han Li gently flicked a finger toward the cauldron, and its lid was immediately flung off. A buzzing sound rang out from within the cauldron, following which a burst of blue light emerged before quickly proliferating through the air. As the blue light flashed over the surrounding landscape, a layer of shimmering blue ice appeared over the ground. Han Li had unleashed his celestial blue flames, and that small blue cauldron was naturally the spirit treasure replica he had obtained from Master Arctic Dragon, the celestial blue cauldron. There were only 2 of these cauldrons in existence, and both of them were in Han Li's possession. As the blue light flashed through the air, the red mist nearby receded, and the volcanic crater suddenly became a lot clearer. A slight smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. He pointed a finger toward the massive cauldron, and it immediately landed right the very center of the sacrificial altar before him. Meanwhile, Han Li had also brought out a palm-sized blue formation plate before rapidly casting a few incantation seals onto it. All of a sudden, a loud thunderclap erupted from the ground near the sacrificial altar, and a massive formation that was shimmering with different colors of spiritual lights suddenly appeared, with the altar situated at the very center of the formation. At this moment, it appeared as if the formation around the sacrificial altar had always been one with the giant cauldron, and there seemed to be no end to the celestial blue flames flowing out from the cauldron. Blue ice soon spread over the entire volcanic crater, and Li wore a serious expression as he pointed several times toward the formation plate in his hand. All of a sudden, an almighty boom erupted from the entire formation as several tens of pillars of blue light shot into the sky around the crater, creating a gargantuan cage of light that completely sealed off the space nearby as well. Each and every pillar was shimmering with green light and reached several hundred feet into the air, creating a formidable sight to behold. Han Li rustled a sleeve, and the other small blue cauldron also shot forth before expanding drastically as it flew through the air. The coffin then hovered toward the air above the massive formation at Han Li's behest, only stopping after reaching an altitude of over 200 feet. Silver light flashed, and the humanoid puppet appeared, standing on one corner of the cauldron in a completely stationary manner. Han Li nodded upon seeing this before abruptly patting one of the spirit beast pouches hanging from his waist. A gust of glacial wind was immediately swept up, following which 12 four-winged centipedes emerged from within the pouch, each of which was several feet in length. These were none other than his 12 six-winged frost centipedes. As soon as these centipedes appeared, they immediately began to blast glacial winds out of their mouths, sending swaths of white mist rising high into the air. The centipedes then obscured themselves within this white mist before splitting up and flying to all corners of the cage of light. After setting up all of these measures, Han Li was feeling a lot more assured. However, he still didn't dare to grow complacent as he carefully examined the surrounding formation again. After verifying that there were no issues, he stood at a certain point within the formation and made a hand seal, upon which a layer of purple flames abruptly appeared over his body. He then slowly sank into the ground as if he were nothing more than an illusionary mirage, disappearing from view in the blink of an eye. As such, the only things left within the massive cage of light were the two cauldrons, the completely stationary humanoid puppet, and the 12 clouds of fluttering white mist. Meanwhile, Han Li had already reached several hundred feet deep into the ground, and was currently situated within a vast expanse of scorching crimson lava. The temperatures here could melt a human away into nothingness in a matter of seconds, yet Han Li remained completely unaffected in his cocoon of purple apex flames. However, as the glacial powers of his flames intertwined with the scorching lava, an incessant burst of rumbling akin to that of relentless thunderclaps erupted nearby, and that was rather annoying to listen to. It wasn't that Han Li didn't want to switch over to the barrier manifested by his fire dragon pillars. A fire attribute barrier would naturally be able to fuse as one with the surrounding lava quite easily. However, having to control the temperatures within the barrier under such intense heat would result in excessive magic power expenditure, so it was much more efficient to use his glacial flames instead. As such, Han Li wasn't going to summon that barrier prior to encountering the Purisun flame essence. Even though he had unleashed his spiritual sense to its very maximal extent, the fact that he was submerged in lava greatly inhibited his detection radius, making it impossible for him to sense anything beyond a radius of around 1,000 feet. And Li couldn't help but heave a faint sigh upon making this observation. It was no wonder that Master Arctic Dragon had failed on so many occasions to obtain the Purisun flame essence, even though he knew that it was right in this volcano, to the extent that he had completely given up on trying to procure the flame essence altogether. Under such an environment, it was quite a stretch to ask even a late-nascent soul great cultivator to capture a wisp of Purisun flame essence, which already possessed a certain degree of spiritual nature. Only a deity transformation cultivator would have a chance of accomplishing this feat. Even though he had already made extensive preparations in advance, he was still quite unsure whether he would actually secure the flame essence. All of a sudden, Han Li patted the Gradian fire raven, which was still perched on his shoulder. The fire raven spread its wings and flew out of the purple flame barrier, instantly disappearing into the lava up ahead. The entire process was completely soundless, and the fire raven glided through the lava without any impediment, nor did it seem to be affected by the scorching temperatures of the lava at all. Han Li was initially a little speechless upon seeing this, following which a sense of ecstasy welled up in his heart. The Gradian True Flame was one of the most powerful yin attribute existences in the human world, and it seemed to be able to thrive even in lava. As one of the 3 true spirit flames, It appeared that there had to be some secrets hidden within the Gradian true flame waiting to be uncovered. If he had the opportunity to do so in the future, he would really have to conduct some thorough research into these flames. The Gradian true flame was born in extreme glacial conditions, while the Purisun flame essence was born in extreme heat. Yin and Yang attracted one another like opposite magnetic poles, so if the Purisun flame essence was nearby, then it would be forcibly drawn to Han Li by his Gradian fire raven. With that in mind, Han Li followed along behind the fire raven from a long distance away, roaming throughout the lava with this volcanic crater as the center where he commenced his search. Several days passed by, and Han Li had almost searched the entirety of this area, which spanned a radius of over 5,000 kilometers. In particular, he made sure to conduct thorough searches in the locations where Master Arctic Dragon had once made sightings of the Purisun flame essence, but much to his dismay, his search remained completely fruitless. As such, Han Li was forced to expand the scope of his search, but the Purisun flame essence continued to elude him, as if it didn't even exist here. A month later, Han Li was searching through a location tens of thousands of kilometers away from the volcanic crater. His face remained completely expressionless, but he was truly starting to become rather impatient. He was traversing through scorching lava day after day, seeing only vast expanses of crimson everywhere he looked. Furthermore, he had to constantly unleash his spiritual sense to its maximal extent during this process, expending a vast amount of magic power. Anyone would find this to be unbearable if they were in Han Li's shoes. Just as Han Li was contemplating whether it was time to return to the surface in order to replenish his spiritual power again, his expression suddenly changed, and a hint of surprise and elation appeared in his eyes. He immediately patted a storage pouch hanging from his waist, and the small black vial containing the unbroken sink devils was immediately summoned. The vial tipped itself over in the lava before releasing the 5 devils. The 5 devils were clearly rather uncomfortable in the lava, but the grayish-white devilish chi swirling around their bodies was able to keep the scorching temperatures at bay. Han Li began to chant something, and the 5 devils transformed into ghostly heads, disappearing into the lava in different directions. Han Li then rustled his sleeve again to release his fire dragon pillars, and the crimson light barrier appeared around him. At the same time, his body swayed before becoming blurry and indistinct, completely camouflaging himself in the surrounding lava in the end. As such, the entire place had fallen completely silent aside from the occasional sound of flowing lava. Around 10 minutes later, a streak of crimson light flashed, and the Gradian fire raven emerged from the lava before diving headfirst into the lava on another side. Almost at the exact same moment, the lava nearby began to surge and tumble violently, and its temperature spiked drastically by more than twofold. At the same time, silver light flashed, and something sped past in hot pursuit behind the Gradian fire raven. As the silver light disappeared, the surrounding lava settled back into its original state, but the scorching temperatures refused to let up. Right at this moment, red light flashed, and Han Li emerged nearby in his crimson light barrier. He wore an elated look on his face as he gave chase in the direction that the silver light had sped away toward. As such, the 3 pursued one another in direct succession, covering a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers within a few hours, taking them close to the volcanic crater, where the formation had been set up earlier. However, trouble suddenly struck at this point. The Gradian fire raven's speed and dexterity remained completely unaffected by the lava around it, but it was clearly slightly slower than the ball of silver light pursuing it. After such an extensive chase, the silver light finally caught up to it when they were still close to 10 kilometers away from the volcanic crater. The silver light abruptly pounced onto the Gradian fire raven, and the crimson and silver lights intertwined with one another. Meanwhile, Han Li was too scared to approach ball of silver light in fear that he would startle it away, but through his spiritual sense connection with the Gradian fire raven, he was finally able to catch a clear glimpse of this ball of silver light. It turned out that this was a miniature Pegasus only around a few inches in size. Its entire body was a pristine white color, yet its wings were of a shimmering silver hue. As soon as the Pegasus caught up to the Gradian fire raven, it immediately summoned countless silver flame flowers on the surface of its wings. The Pegasus that was rushing toward the Gradian fire raven was naturally none other than the true spirit flame manifested by the Purisun flame essence. When the Gradian fire raven had first been born, it had been extremely feeble, which was why Han Li was able to easily subdue and capture it. However, After devouring an immeasurable amount of myriad-year glacial chi in the profound Jade cave of the North Night Palace, it had become a lot more powerful. As such, its power was actually quite comparable to the purest unflame essence. However, the miniature white Pegasus was able to borrow on the boundless power of the lava around it, thereby giving it a distinct advantage. In contrast, the gradient fire raven had to expend a portion of its spiritual power to ward off the scorching temperatures of the lava, thereby placing it at a further disadvantage. As such, it was forced firmly onto the back foot after just a few exchanges. Han Li's brows furrowed upon making this observation through his spiritual sense connection. However, neither he nor the five devils could assist the gradient fire raven now, as that would only startle the purest unflame essence. From Master Arctic Dragon's memories, he had gleaned that the purest unflame essence was an extremely cautious existence, and it would run away at the first sign of any potential danger. Furthermore, its flame movement techniques were extremely profound, allowing it to traverse through the lava in a virtually undetectable manner. As such, if it were allowed to get away, then there was no chance for Han Li to chase it down again. If the purest unflame essence were to be startled once, Han Li wasn't sure if using the gradient fire raven as bait would work a second time. As such, even though the fire raven was clearly struggling in its battle, he didn't dare to intervene, yet his mind was racing for a potential course of action that he could take. All of a sudden, an idea occurred to him. He immediately made a hand seal before opening his mouth to expel a white bead. It was none other than that snow crystal pearl that the purple apex flames had been nurturing. Han Li cast a few incantation seals onto the pearl, following which it shot forth as a streak of white light. The snow crystal pearl reached the battlefield between the Pegasus and the gradient fire raven in the blink of an eye. The pearl then descended toward the two combatants. The Pegasus was immediately startled by its approach, and it flapped his little wings, abruptly vanishing amid a ball of silver flames. In the next instant, it appeared over 200 feet away, staring at the pearl with bewilderment in its eyes. However, the gradient fire raven had no intention of evading the pearl. Instead, it took this opportunity to pounce on the pearl before swallowing it, upon which brilliant crimson light erupted from its body. After doing that, the fire raven immediately continued to flee into the distance without any hesitation. The Pegasus faltered slightly upon seeing this. It carefully examined its surroundings, and after determining that there was nothing for it to fear, it finally spread its wings and gave chase once again. However, with the assistance of the power of the purple apex flame stored within that snow crystal pearl, the gradient fire raven was flying far more quickly than it was previously capable of, and the Pegasus was unable to chase it down for the time being. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had reached the massive volcanic crater, following which the gradient fire raven immediately shot upward toward the surface. The Pegasus had been chasing the fire raven for so long, so it was naturally unwilling to give up. As such, it hurriedly spread its wings and also flew upward toward the surface. Both of them were fire spirits, so they were naturally unobstructed by the thick layers of earth that stood in their way. Moments later, the two fire spirits emerged from the ground one after another, appearing right within the massive cage of light. As soon as the purest unflame essence appeared, it sensed that something was amiss. However, it was already too late. The humanoid puppet was already prepared in advance, and it abruptly stomped down onto the celestial blue cauldron beneath its feet. A burst of blue flames immediately shot forth from within, transforming into a blue glacial worm in the blink of an eye. The gradient fire raven also launched a counterattack, turning around before opening its beak to expel the snow crystal pearl. At the same time, the entire formation was activated by the humanoid puppet. The purest unflame essence immediately attempted to flee back into the lava upon seeing this. The volcanic crater where it and the gradient fire raven was the only area that had been left intentionally free of blue ice. However, as the formation was activated, blue ice was also beginning to seal up that crater. However, the rate at which the ice is spreading over the crater was far inferior to the speed of the purest unflame essence's retreat. Just as the miniature Pegasus was about to disappear into the ground, a horrified look suddenly appeared in its eyes, and it abruptly spread its wings, vanishing before appearing again over 200 feet away. Almost at the exact same moment, 5 pillars of light of different colors shot forth into the air from the ground below. 5 bursts of grayish-white devilish chi then emerged, transforming into 5 ghostly heads, each of which was around a foot in size. They were none other than the unbroken Sync devils. Han Li was also slowly rising up from the ground. At this point, the entire crater had been covered in a thick layer of blue ice due to the effect of the formation. Han Li stood upon the blue ice and raised his head with a serious look on his face. The glacial worm manifested from celestial blue flames, the gradient fire raven, and the 5 ghostly heads were all converging toward the Pegasus. However, just as Master Arctic Dragon's memories had revealed, the pure sun flame essence was extremely nimble and agile, flashing through the air as a completely untraceable streak of silver light. The gradient fire raven was the only one that could match its speed, while the 5 devils and the glacial worm were clearly unable to keep up. However, on this occasion, the Pegasus was the one being debilitated by the glacial chi emanating from the cage of celestial blue flames, and with the enhancement of Han Li's snow crystal pearl, the gradient fire raven was now slightly faster than the pure sun flame essence. If it weren't for the fact that the Pegasus' movement techniques were truly extremely agile and unpredictable, it would have been captured by the fire raven long ago. Even so, the Pegasus was still struck on several occasions in a short period of time by the crimson light being blasted out of the fire raven's mouth, thereby inflicting a few minor injuries upon it. However, the Pegasus would rather allow itself to be struck by attacks rather than retaliate, as doing so would force it to slow down, thereby giving the 5 devils and the glacial worm a chance to chase it down. Han Li stood down below with his hands clasped behind his back, seeming content just to spectate. Meanwhile, the humanoid puppet was maintaining the function of the formation while expressionlessly manipulating the glacial worm. All of a sudden, the Pegasus identified an opportunity and came hurtling down toward the ground after allowing itself to be struck by another one of the gradient fire raven's attacks. It reached the ground down below in a flash without any premonition, then attempted to unleash a movement technique to flee the scene. However, the Pegasus' body faltered as soon as it came into contact with the blue ice down below. During this split second of delay, a streak of crimson light and a burst of blue glacial mist suddenly hurtled toward it. At the same time, a strange, unsettling cry rang out. A flash of horror appeared in the Pegasus' eyes, but it was clearly too late to evade. However, it managed to react extremely quickly, flapping its wings desperately to create a series of silver flowers. These flowers instantly enshrouded its entire body, and it appeared that it was planning to take these attacks head-on. 2 muffled thumps rang out, and the crimson light and blue glacial mist struck the silver flowers in quick succession. Much to Han Li's surprise, the Pegasus borrowed the power from the impact of the attacks, flying rapidly through the air to appear over 100 feet away in the blink of an eye. It stumbled slightly to arrest its momentum before escaping toward another direction in the cage as a streak of silver light. Even though the Pegasus was still traveling extremely quickly, Han Li was able to identify using his bright-sight spirit eyes that it was clearly missing a chunk of one of its wings, and a section of one of its legs also appeared to have been dismembered. A smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he finally sprang into action. Azure and white light flashed behind him, upon which a pair of wings appeared on his back. He gently flapped those wings and a light breeze was swept up, following which he completely vanished. The gradient fire raven was also throwing itself at the pure sun flame essence again. However, the Pegasus had already opened up some distance between them by borrowing the momentum of the attacks from earlier, and it unleashed its maximal speed as it reached the border of the cage after a few successive flashes of silver light. A pillar of blue light stood in its way, so the Pegasus decided to fly around it. However, the humanoid puppet up above immediately made a hand seal upon seeing this, and brilliant light erupted from all of the pillars as strands of light shot forth, creating a dense net that cut off the Pegasus' route of escape. The Pegasus was startled by this development, but it was too late to turn back. As such, it blasted several tens of silver flowers toward the net while continuing to fly full speed ahead. It was planning to puncture the net through brute force. However, what the Pegasus had failed to notice was that 2 clouds of white mist had already appeared above its head. The white mist suddenly surged as 2 gusts of white glacial winds swept forth. Immediately thereafter, 2 snowy white centipedes shot forth like lightning. These were none other than 2 of the 6-winged frost centipedes Han Li had set up in advance. As such, the Pegasus could only evade the 2 gusts of glacial winds and fly toward another direction. At this moment, the fire raven, 5 devils, and glacial worm converged toward it once again. However, as soon as the Pegasus had changed directions, black light suddenly appeared before its eyes, and a glittering and translucent black blade instantly flashed through its body. An expression of shock and horror appeared in its eyes as its body was sliced cleanly in half. The two halves of its body reverted back to their silver flame from before instantly merging back together to form a miniature Pegasus again. However, its body was quite blurry and insubstantial, clearly indicating that it was unable to immediately take on its original form again. It was quite apparent that the surprise attack from the Devil Essence dagger had proven to be very effective. Right at this moment, a dull thunderclap suddenly rang out overhead. An azure arc of lightning flashed, following which Han Li abruptly appeared and immediately flicked his 10 fingers in quick succession. 10 fiery threads hurtled through the air, puncturing the Pegasus' body in a flash. At the same time, Han Li began to chant something, and the fiery threads instantly bound the Pegasus tightly. It was completely powerless to resist against Han Li's surprise attacks. Han Li was naturally ecstatic upon seeing this. He flipped his hand over to summon a stack of restriction talismans that he had prepared well in advance, and a dozen or so streaks of light of different colors flew toward the Purisun flame essence as he flung the talismans through the air. If these restriction talismans could plaster themselves to the Pegasus' body, it would definitely be unable to escape, despite the fact that it possessed the body of a fire spirit. However, a surprising turn of events unfolded. The tightly bound Pegasus suddenly let loose a desperate neigh as brilliant silver light erupted all over its body. The fiery threads detached themselves from its body, flashing toward the oncoming restriction talismans instead. Loud explosions erupted as all of the talismans were reduced to dust, while the fiery threads continued to hurtle toward Han Li. Even the perpetually calm and collected Han Li was quite startled by this development. However, he immediately decided on a course of action, raising an arm before waving his hand toward the fiery threads. The threads immediately stiffened before disappearing into his hand in a slightly reluctant manner. Meanwhile, the Pegasus was taking advantage of the situation to try and escape again. Han Li's expression darkened as he harumphed coldly. Upon hearing his harumph, the Pegasus suddenly shuddered as its body plummeted involuntarily toward the ground. Han Li had unleashed his Spirit Stun Thorn secret technique. Han Li flapped his wings and abruptly vanished, appearing directly below the falling Pegasus in the next instant. On this occasion, he merely made a grabbing motion toward the Pegasus rather than rely on any treasures. A large hand constructed from purple flames appeared out of thin air, forcibly locking the miniature Pegasus in a tight grasp. Brilliant purple glacial light erupted as a massive block of purple ice sealed the fire spirit's body within. At this moment, the Gradian Fire Raven and the glacial worm also finally arrived. Both of them plunged into the purple ice without any hesitation, quickly fusing as one with the block of ice amid flashes of spiritual light. Almost at the exact same moment, the Pegasus within the block of ice seemed to have recovered from the effect of the Spirit Stun Thorn, and silver flames immediately erupted violently all over its body as it attempted to escape. However, with the infusion of the Gradian True Flame into the block of ice, there was no way that it would be able to escape in a short period of time. The blue glacial worm and the Gradian Fire Raven were like fish in water as they surrounded the Pegasus, blasting out gusts of glacial chi from their mouths to forcibly repress its silver flames. The 5 devils also arrived at this moment. Each of them blasted a type of glacial flame out of their mouths, which then converged to form a 5-colored glacial flame that hurtled toward the miniature Pegasus. Upon coming into contact with this 5-colored glacial flame, the miniature Pegasus immediately became extremely slow and sluggish. On the contrary, the glacial worm and Gradian Fire Raven were seemingly completely unaffected, even though the 5-colored glacial flames had also washed over them. Instead, the glacial chi billowing out of their mouths had become even more powerful. The Purisun flame essence was unable to withstand such a ferocious assault, and it gradually began to slow down even further as its aura became more and more feeble. Han Li immediately swept his sleeve through the air upon seeing this, summoning a dozen or so talismans. These talismans immediately punctured the block of ice before plastering themselves to the Pegasus' body. The fire spirit finally relinquished its resistance with a look of despair on its face. The silver light emanating from its body dimmed, and it was unable to maintain its Pegasus form any longer as it reverted back to a ball of shimmering silver flames. The talisman stuck to the Pegasus seized the moment, fusing together into layers of rainbow light that imprisoned the silver flames. Under Han Li's command, The gradient fire raven floating within the purple ice turned into a ball of scarlet flame, enveloping the Purisun flame essence. Then with his hands in an incantation gesture, he struck the purple ice with several spell seals. Light flashed as they passed into it, and the huge glacier glistened as it suddenly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a fist-sized ball. Han Li waved his hand, summoning it into his grasp and examining it with interest. At that moment, Han Li heard a child sigh at his ear, followed by words containing a hint of envy. "I didn't expect you to be lucky enough to truly acquire Great Sun Essence Fire. If you are able to fuse it with Gradient True Flame, you will gain far more than what you imagined. I fear there are many immortal spirit flames in the spirit realm that don't exceed it." Immortal spirit flames. Han Li's expression stirred, but he didn't continue pursuing the topic. Rather, he clasped his hands, resulting in a roll of thunder. Thin arcs of golden lightning shot out and tightly coiled around the ice until it was fastened and secure. In the blink of an eye, all trace of the purple ice was replaced with golden lightning. He shook his sleeve and summoned a small azure cauldron, spinning in front of him before arriving in front of him. It was the Heaven Void Cauldron. He flicked his finger on the cauldron, sounding a clear front from it. The cauldron lid shot up in the air, and a mass of azure thread streaked out from it, coiling around the ball of golden lightning and dragging it inside. Then, with the use of his artifact imprint technique, he sealed the cauldron. At that moment, he let out a long sigh, but a trace of excitement appeared in his eyes. Having acquired this flame, he'll be able to refine the returning sun water. If he could truly extend his lifespan by several hundred years, he should be able to cultivate the divine essence effuse light, even if it were more difficult than he imagined. Having thought that, Han Li withdrew his puppet and the 5 devils, then moving on to tear down the large-scale spell formation he placed down. It was only after eliminating all traces of his presence did he leave. With that done, he completed all his objectives in the Great Jin, and set off on his journey back to the heavenly south seemingly without any hesitation. After he returned, he would first refine the returning sun water, relieving any worries about his lifespan or Nangong wands. Following that, he would a spatial pocket out of Devil Fall Valley's spatial tier. And lastly, he would use the ghost-sifting banner's soul-producing ability to refine the spatial treasure, the Crimson Soul Flag. Using this flag, he would absorb the Essence Effuse Mountain and bring it back to him to the heavenly south, where he would hide in his spatial pocket, cultivating the divine Essence Effused light to completion, then tackling the barrier to deity transformation stage. In order for this to succeed, he would use the peak-grade wood-attributed spirit stone he had been saving from the last time he attempted to use the 5 glacial flames to break through a bottleneck. Not to mention that the devil essence pill that Xianxia mentioned when he rescued Violet Spirit from Devil Cliff Mountain. Before he departed, he used the myriad-year profound Jade to trade from 3 of the devil essence pills from the old devil, increasing his chances of deity transformation just slightly. However, just the thought of the price for these 3 pills caused Han Li to feel a pang of sorrow. He didn't know how that old devil knew so much about the movements of the North Night Palace's myriad-year profound Jade, but he was greedy enough to take half of it in one swoop. It was unknown if the devil essence pills made for a fair trade, or if he was using it as a pretext for robbery. In any case, no matter how rare the myriad-year profound Jade may be, Han Li viewed the aid of the devil essence pills to be far more important. Any greater chance of deity transformation, no matter how small, is something he couldn't easily relinquish. Even under the circumstances with Xianxia, he could only pinch his nose and accept the trade. When he recalled the smug face on the old devil's face after the trade, he felt somewhat gloomy. But soon, he tossed the matter to the back of his mind and began to contemplate his future plans. Several days later, he arrived at the end of the red mist, disappearing from the edge of the fire prison. Not long after, a few in the Great Jin who discovered the power of Han Li's existence also noticed his sudden disappearance. This caused quite a few attentive individuals to become restless. It was only after Han Li's departure from the Great Jin was confirmed that they all happened to sigh with relief. Although Han Li's name didn't resound in the cultivation world of the Great Jin, there were several fantastical rumors that were related to him, and he was mentioned in the higher echelon of a few great sects. There was a cultivator who wasn't of deity transformation stage, but was able to befriend deity transformation cultivators on equal footing, and even able to easily kill late nascent soul cultivators of the same grade. He also had no fear of his essence eroding from the worldly chi of heaven and earth. This caused many eccentrics to hold him in fear. Now that they knew Han Li had no intention of founding a sect in the Great Jin, they sighed with relief and didn't keep him in mind. Since the day Han Li disappeared, time slowly passed by. It was as if 40 years passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, the cultivation world of the Great Jin was exceedingly peaceful. Although there were events that burst forth on occasion, there was nothing world-shaking. But at that same time, overjoyed laughter bellowed in a cave residence a myriad of kilometers away in the heavenly south. All my hard work has finally paid off. I've finally refined the fire. With this, I can create the returning sun water. Eventually, the laughter in the cave died down until there was only silence. Then a month later, the silhouette slipped out from the mountain cave and tore through the sky in an azure streak. 3 months later, a young man appeared inside Devil Fall Valley, quietly making his way to the valley depths before disappearing once more. More months passed, and a small mountain inside the valley suddenly emitted an endless dark ghostly chi. It was a mist as pitch black as ink and thoroughly enveloped 50 kilometers around it. Yin winds swept through the fog, carrying countless ghostly wails. If anybody walked through it, they would believe they were in the underworld. This extraordinary event continued for half a year before the yin chi gradually dissipated. A month later, the young man strangely appeared from Devil Fall Valley and left as quietly as he appeared. Because his movement and concealment techniques were superb, none had detected any trace of him. Of course, this person was Han Li, who recently finished refining the Crimson Soul Flag and the Spatial Pocket. Several decades before, when he returned to the Drifting Cloud sect from the Great Jin, he spent a great deal of effort before eventually refining the returning sun water and taking it himself. And a few months later, he refined several more bottles. Because Nangong Wan was still in seclusion, he delivered one of the bottles to her cave residence with a flying sword. Then he set off to Devil Fall Valley to refine the Crimson Soul Flag. With tensome ghost-sifting flags, abundant souls, and the guidance of the soaring sky beast, he was able to smoothly refine it despite the time it took. The remnant of the Black Wind banner had finally turned into the Crimson Soul Flag. As of present, Han Li had returned to the sect and began to comprehend the first 2 layers of the divine essence-effused light. After all, even with the Crimson Soul Flag in hand, he needed to be able to command the essence-effused mountain if he wanted it to enter the flag. Before he entered seclusion, he suddenly thought of something and hesitated before bringing a bottle of the returning sun water to the medicinal garden. Afterwards, he immediately returned to seclusion. The human-like puppet was placed inside the cave residence, responsible for using the small, mysterious bottle to nurture spirit insects and a few medicines. 10 years later, Han Li eventually woke from meditation with a trace of perplexion on his face. As expected, the divine essence-effused light is incredibly difficult to cultivate. It seems without the aid of the essence-effused mountain, cultivating the divine light is impossible. Now that I've finished cultivating the first layer, it seems I'll have to go to the Star Palace and retrieve it. A child's image appeared suddenly in front of Han Li and said, "If I were you, I'd first prepare a pure metal-attributed demon core to fully complete 5 elemental spirit roots. Although this is the first I've heard of this method, this technique simultaneously contains the power of all 5 elements. Without the corresponding spirit roots, it would put a vast strain on your body. I know you already mentioned it. However, metal-attributed demon beasts are incredibly rare, and I will require the core from a beast that has metamorphosed. It won't be easy to find." Han Li sighed, and he flipped his hand to produce a beautiful, glistening rainbow light in his hand. The child rolled his eyes and said, "Didn't you already meet that metal-attributed Flood Dragon King in the scattered star seas? That was a genuine grade 10 demon beast. Its demon core should suffice." Han Li frowned and slowly said, "Of course, but the demon beast lives in the outer seas. It won't be easy to reach. I should first prepare several metal-type magic tools before I consider it. I recall you saying that I can use magic tools to replace spirit roots as well." The boy shook his head. "Admittedly, it is true you can use tools instead of demon cores to replace spirit roots. However, it will be far slower to refine, and there is a certain level of risk. With the returning sun water, a bit of time doesn't matter to me. Let's continue talking about this after I arrive at the scattered star seas." Han Li nodded and stood up, stretching his limbs before walking out of the secluded room. In a flash of silver light, another Han Li appeared in front of him. Han Li didn't take it to mind and mentally exchanged a bit of information with the second nascent soul in his puppet. In a sudden change of expression, his face changed and he cried out, "What? The profound goddess Palm has revived." When Han Li acquired this information from his puppet, his mind underwent a massive shock. Before he secluded himself, he did pour a few drops of the returning sun water on the profound goddess Palm out of curiosity, but it remained as dead as ever. But with the news of its revival, he could hardly believe it. Han Li promptly made his way into the medicine garden. The profound goddess Palm was placed next to several other precious spirit medicine, such as the Ninkril ginseng. When he arrived, he clearly saw the current condition of the profound goddess Palm. Despite what mental preparations he made, he was fully shocked. Originally, the green liquid from the small mysterious bottle only changed its color green slightly, but it remained completely dry. But now, its palms spread throughout the ground and climbed up on many white jade stone pillars. It was lush, green, and filled with life. The vine emitted a faint scent that exceeded the qualities of the medicines in the garden. Even the Ninkril spirit ginseng's white rabbit incarnation felt at ease sleeping on one of the vine roots. When Han Li arrived near it, the white rabbit's ears moved and its fire-red eyes opened a sliver, and resumed its nap after seeing it was Han Li. After several hundred years of contact with Han Li, the Ninkril ginseng's incarnation had begun to treat Han Li's garden as its own. Under his protection, the rabbit hadn't encountered the slightest danger and no longer felt any danger towards him. Han Li remained silent and didn't bother it. Rather, he began to examine the vine. Apart from emitting an astonishing spiritual qi, the revived profound goddess Palm appeared no different from ordinary vines. But under careful examination, one could find a few peculiar differences. The vine's color was emerald green, but its surface seemed to give off a metallic sheen. Additionally, the veins of the vine's leaves were bizarre. Each one was distinct but were somewhat familiar. Han Li silently gazed at the leaves, and his heart stirred as something came to mind. The vein patterns had a faint resemblance to the silver runes on the golden jade tome. He frowned and examined a dozen more leaves before eventually discovering something wondrous. The leaf patterns were written in half of the silver rune scripts, as if they were written only to half completion. Han Li was amazed for a long while. Eventually, he brought himself to touch the leaves with his fingers. They were sleek and smooth, as if he touched fine jade. He stroked his chin and began to wear a pensive expression. At that moment, he thought to call out to the soaring sky beast and ask it a few questions related to the profound spirit trees, but he finally decided not to. As of current, the child was most likely cultivating inside the heaven-void cauldron. He was completely ignorant of what was happening. Even since he returned to his cave residence, he wanted to make use of the cauldron's power and completely severed the demon's connection to the outside. So long as he remained in secluded cultivation, he wouldn't release the demon beast to prevent any of his secrets from being made known. As such, the soaring sky beast didn't have any knowledge of the small, mysterious bottle. As for any rumors or legends regarding the profound goddess Palm, Han Li had already researched them. According to a few creation myths, when life sprung from primal chaos, the profound heavens came, being lifted with the appearance of spirit trees. Regardless of the spirit tree, it would spring flowers and grow fruit that granted inconceivable abilities that ignored the laws of the world. They were true heaven-defying treasures. However, these were only rumors during ancient times. He had never seen it for himself. However, for this to be mentioned several times in ancient records could be considered to be substantial. Furthermore, they had unique growth cycles that spanned 100,000 years, but their flowers would bloom and bear fruits that lasted only a few days or even a few hours. Under such a time, their ripeness would deteriorate quickly, meaning that it would only be wishful thinking for anyone to harvest them. Only the flowers and fruits of profound heavenly trees are the only ones that possess heaven-breaking abilities that can ignore the laws of the world. As for vines and wood, they could only be materials for tool refinement. They were nowhere near as valuable. Although Han Li didn't have the child know of the small portion of the profound goddess Palm root in his possession, he didn't plan on having him know of its revival with the returning sun water either. Even if the profound goddess Palm found its way into someone else's possession, it would be of little value as they couldn't acquire its flowers or fruit. But it would tempt others nevertheless and cause huge problems. And with his small mysterious bottle, if he could use it to mature the vine, he should be able to acquire its fruits and flowers after 200 or 300 years. He wasn't about to give up on such a grand opportunity. If he allowed the child to know of this matter, who knows if he could get that information to his main body in the spirit realm? That was just asking for trouble. In any case, though, the soaring sky beast should know far more about the tree than he did. But with further thought, he gave up on the idea. Having come to his decision, he let out a long sigh and placed down several profound restrictions around the plant, causing the medicine garden to resume its original appearance. 3 days later, Han Li left the puppet at the cave residence as he called out to Lu Luo and his other sect elders, informing them of his departure. He later appeared above a nameless mountain in the scattered star seas and disappeared past the horizon in an azure streak. One night several months later, in the Star Palace Temple at the top of Heavenly Star City, a beautiful woman in white palace robes was sitting down on a mat in a hidden room. Her eyes were closed, her hands were in an incantation gesture, and white light roamed across her body as if she were cultivating something. As the spiritual light flickered continuously, a trace of pain appeared on the woman's face. The white light pulsed in brightness, and just as it appeared to lose control, the woman ceased her incantation gesture and halted her cultivation. Following that, the white light from her body eventually dissipated. She let out a sigh and opened her eyes, unconsciously looked around her. The woman was immediately frightened, and shock appeared on her face. Sitting at the corner of the room was a person with their arms behind his back. He was looking at her with a mysterious smile. "Brother Han, so it is you." The woman relaxed after clearly seeing his face and sweetly smiled, but through the depth of her beauty was a faint trace of fear. This was an important area for the Star Palace. There were over 30 layers of restrictions present, but he was able to sneak in without alerting her. "Fellow Taoist Ling, in the years we haven't seen each other, your grace remains strong. However, your cultivation technique seems unsuitable." Han Li spoke with a slight smile. "As you've said, there must be a problem with my cultivation. I've been meaning to seek some guidance from an expert. Now that you're here, I'll have to make a request." Han Li chuckled. "Oh, guidance will be out of the question, but I'll give you my thoughts after you speak. But before that, I want to retrieve the Xianxia mountain." Ling Yuling was stunned and hesitantly asked, "Of course, it was something you left in our care after all. However, how do you intend on moving it?" "I have a way, but I don't know if it will truly work. I can only give it a try," Han Li slowly replied. With surprise briefly appearing on her face, she answered, "In that case, I'll guide you there." "Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoist Ling." Han Li nodded with satisfaction. 2 hours later, the two arrived in a passage underneath the mountain, arriving in front of a large jade door. Ling Yuling released the seal on the door with the command medallion in her hand, and it slowly opened. Han Li let out a sigh and slowly walked in. Ling Yuling followed after some hesitation. The past scene appeared once more. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D42B, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D5FA. As they walked past the gate, the elemental power immediately immersed them and violently stirred the spiritual power in their bodies to rush out. However, Han Li was now at the peak of late nascent soul stage with far denser and purer magic power than before. He wasn't about to allow his spiritual power to be absorbed. He immediately circulated his cultivation art and suppressed the oddities occurring in his body. Then, with his hands held in an incantation gesture, he slowly focused on the center of his chest. A crackle sounded. An egg-sized ball of light appeared, glowing with 5-colored light that roamed across its surface. Suddenly, nearby elemental light coiling around Han Li immediately dimmed by a third. Standing behind him, Ling Yuling could sense the changes of elemental power and smiled. "Congratulations, Brother Han. You've completed the first layer of the divine Xianxia's light. If I hadn't refined the light to this point, I wouldn't have been able to shift the mountain," Han Li casually replied with a chuckle. Ling Yuling couldn't help but urge, "Although you only cultivated the first layer of the divine Xianxia's light, you can move the mountain. But I fear it won't be an easy matter to take it. If Brother Han's method isn't effective, wouldn't it be better to join our palace? You have my guarantee that no one will disturb your cultivation and that you will have priority over our resources." Han Li glanced at Ling Yuling and indifferently said, "Fellow Taoist Ling doesn't need to mention it again. If I intended on entering the palace, I would have already done so. As for whether my method will work, I'll have to give it a try first." Han Li tossed the ball of spiritual light in his hand, which has suspended itself in midair. He reached to his waist with his other hand, summoning a small flag that was several inches long. The flag was entirely crimson and released bursts of scarlet light that contained ghostly wails. Ling Yuling glanced at the item in surprise and shot an odd glance at Han Li. However, Han Li had no intention of explaining anything. He simply muttered to himself and tossed the flag above him. Light flashed and a small flag massively surged in size, turning 3 meters tall in the blink of an eye. The surface of the flag glistened crimson as if it were coated with blood. When he pointed at the huge flag, it spread open, emitting a mist until it was only a crimson cloud, and rushed to the top of Xianxia Mountain. The cloud roiled as it stopped over its destination and began to slowly expand, covering most of the top and filling the air with a stench as if blood were mixed into the air. Ling Yuling swept her spiritual sense through the cloud and sensed an unfathomable amount of yin souls. In a start, she hastily withdrew her spiritual sense, a sense of dread lingering in her mind. At that moment, Han Li took large steps towards the Xianxia Mountain and waved his hand into the air. A ball of light flashed and shot toward the small mountain, vanishing from sight. Han Li waved his hand again, this time reaching his hand out and grabbing at the air. The small mountain flickered with rainbow light and swayed several times. Its rumbling shook the air, and it eventually lifted off from the ground, slowly floating up to the blood cloud. Lin Yuling looked on in astonishment. The mountain entered the cloud and vanished. Han Li then released a spell seal from his hand. The blood cloud roiled before it eventually shrunk and returned to its form as a crimson banner several inches large. It fell back into Han Li's hand only a moment later. The mountain was now as empty as could be, as if the Xianxia Mountain was never there. Letter 1D453, letter 1D45F, letter 212F, letter 1D626, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D626, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D4C2. A spatial treasure. Ling Yuling eventually regained her bearings, shock still clear on her face. The treasure does have some spatial abilities, and it seems I've given you quite a show. Han Li smiled in satisfaction, having swept his spiritual sense through the Crimson Soul banner. Ling Yuling gasped in surprise and let it has spatial abilities and can even take in the Xianxia Mountain. I fear only a few exist in the mortal world. How fortunate that fellow Taoist Han was able to acquire one. Back when the Star Palace sages left behind the method to control Han Li, they believed that cultivating the divine Xianxia light would have kept him tied to the Star Palace. But now, Han Li rendered her completely powerless with this ingenious move. The woman inwardly sighed, finally giving up on having Han Li join the Star Palace. Crimson light flashed from his hand and the small flag disappeared. Following that, Han Li pondered to himself for a moment and smiled at her. I can stay at the palace for a short amount of time, exchange a few cultivation insights with you, and take a look at what is causing you problems with your cultivation. But during this time, I still have something I need your help with. Although Ling Yuling blanked for a second, she immediately replied with a smile. Brother Han has already treated our palace with much kindness. It is only natural for us to help you as best we can. There is no need to be so polite. It is a small matter. I want to know the most recent whereabouts of the golden worm in the outer seas. The more accurate its position, the better. Han Li calmly spoke as if it were a trivial matter, but Ling Yuling was astonished upon hearing him. Her eyes grew wide. With a hesitant tone, she muttered, Brother Han wishes to know the whereabouts of that old demon. Could it be you? Han Li shot a glance at the girl and raised his eyebrow. Of course I have reasons for finding the Golden Worm King. You don't need to think too much as to why. I will not involve your palace. Or do you mean to say the matter is too difficult? Ling Yuling shook her head and replied with a solemn expression. Brother Han has shown much kindness to the palace. Even with a more difficult request, I still wouldn't decline it. However, these past few years the palace has completely withdrawn our men from the outer seas. And as the Golden Worm is a grade 10 demon cultivation, I fear it will take more than just a few days to find its whereabouts. Time is no matter. I don't mind waiting for several years for this information, Han Li casually replied. Ling Yuling wiped away her hesitation and stated, in that case, we will immediately make arrangements. Fellow Taoist, you can stay as long as you wish. Han Li nodded, satisfied to hear of her agreement. The two then chatted a while longer and departed from the cave. 2 years later, a man and a woman floated above an unnamed island in the outer star seas. The man had a common appearance but also bright and intelligent eyes. The woman had a delicate and dainty appearance. The two appeared both quite young, but the woman appeared to treat the man with the utmost respect. The young man appeared completely indifferent. From what you said, the Golden Worm King should arrive at this island. Could it have changed its mind and decided to go elsewhere? The man's voice wasn't loud, but the woman replied with the utmost respect. Elder Han, please be at ease. I've already made several inquiries. It is information acquired from the soul search of a high-grade demon cultivator. At the depths of this island should be an extremely rare spirit fruit. Although it isn't very useful to humans, it is beloved by the Worm Clan. The Golden Worm King comes here every 10 years when the spirit fruit is ripe and eats it below the island no matter what obstruction. If the location of the fruit didn't change or if it died, the Worm Clan would have moved elsewhere. It should be the period where the spirit fruit is ripe. The Golden Worm King should definitely come under normal circumstances. And then I will wait a few more days, the man said with a sullen voice. Of course, the man was Han Li, and the woman was a disciple Ling Yuling sent to guide him. After 2 years of searching with the complete might of the Star Palace, they finally found the whereabouts of the Golden Worm King. Han Li remained at the palace during this time, until this woman led him outside the city to a secret teleportation formation, quietly bringing him to the outer seas where he waited on the island for several months. Until now, he had yet to see any trace of the Golden Worm King, leading to Han Li to ask the woman again out of impatience. And with the woman giving a confident reply, Han Li's expression relaxed. Just when Han Li sighed and thought to ask her for more details, his expression suddenly changed, and he turned his head to look at the distant sea. Good, it finally arrived. From its aura, there is no doubt it is the Golden Worm King. Delight briefly appeared on Han Li's face. Then he turned to the girl and commanded, "You should leave now and take yourself out of danger." When the disciples heard him, she felt her heart tremble and gave him a quick curtsy before flying away in a white streak. When Han Li saw the woman leave, he shook his sleeve, summoning forth a small black bottle. A white demonic wind blew past, followed by the gradual appearance of 5 skeletons. Go! With Han Li's mental command, the 5 skeletons immediately scattered, riding away on demonic winds and vanishing in an instant. Soon after, a spirit beast pouch flew out, and a dozen 4-winged centipedes buzzed out. Han Li then commanded them to burrow themselves into the sea underneath the island. Han Li took another look at the distant sea and sneered, before suddenly fading from sight. Despite the many techniques he released, this all happened in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the island was completely barren, as if no one had ever been there. In the time it took to finish a meal, light flashed from the horizon. A golden and an azure streak tore through the air, quickly making their way past the vast ocean. Their light faded to reveal 2 silhouettes. One of them had a tall and sturdy body, wore a golden embroidered gown and a green beard. The other had a thinner body, a silver hat and azure robes. As soon as the two appeared, the large man with golden robes wore a hesitant expression over his dignified face. He quickly looked around him but discovered nothing odd. When the azure-robed cultivators saw this, he wore an odd expression and asked, "What? Did fellow Taoist Jin discover something amiss?" The gold-robed man frowned and doubtfully said, "When we were farther, it appeared there was someone that swept past us with their spiritual sense. However, that spiritual sense was somewhat weak, so it could have been a trick of the mind." The azure-robed man laughed. "If that was truly the case, wouldn't that mean their spiritual sense is far more powerful than Brother Jin's? How can that be possible? Brother Feng thinks too highly of me. Although I am known as the Golden Worm King, that is only in the nearby seas that shake from my might. Outside, I'm nothing much." The golden-robed man shook his head and quickly swept his spiritual sense past the island. He felt relieved at having found nothing. Of course, he couldn't have known that the sink devils had already scattered to the far edges of the sky, and the 6-winged frost centipedes were hidden a kilometer below. As for Han Li, his spiritual sense was indeed far superior to the worm, so detection was impossible. The azure-robed cultivator disapproved the large man's carefulness, but he smiled and praised, "Brother Jin is truly modest. Apart from deity transformation cultivators, what could possibly threaten you? However, this place is quite desolate. If you haven't brought me here, I couldn't have known that the dragon scale fruit grows here. I found the tree unintentionally in the past. From then on, I came here to pick the fruit once every 10 years. In human records, the fruit is said to be wondrous. Once eaten, it would allow one to soar the skies. High-grade cultivators may see it as worthless, but it is rather delicious for those from the worm clan like me. But who could have known that the spirit fruit is beyond what the human records have described? If one eats it often, it can strengthen one's body, granting limitless strength. However, this won't occur without periodic consumption. Very few of these fruits exist in this world, so human cultivators weren't able to figure this out. However, I'm quite surprised that fellow Taoist Feng knows many secrets, including the method transport the fruit tree. The large, golden-robed man looked at the azure-robed cultivator with an odd expression. The azure-robed cultivator calmly replied, I merely found the ancient remains belonging to an ancient demon. The secrets of the fruit and its method of moving it was left behind on it. It also mentioned that each time a fruit was taken, it would change one's body very slightly where one wouldn't notice any effects. But if one were to eat one every day over a long time, one's body would become as tyrannical as that of a true dragon. But there is no way of knowing that is true. In theory, it certainly is possible, but in truth, that can't happen. Even if we gathered together all of the dragon-scale fruit trees, there is no way for one person to eat that many of the fruit. Even a single tree is extremely previous to our worm clan. Actually, if it weren't for your complete confidence in the method to transplant the fruit tree, I wouldn't have brought you here, the large man said with a solemn expression. I admire many of the fellow Taoists in your clan. I wouldn't dare to deceive you. However, you've agreed to my. The azure-robed demon cultivator was Fengzai, the grade 9 windbreaker beast that pursued Han Li in the past, the same one who he acquired the thunderstorm wings from. And that large man was the Golden Worm King. As of current, he didn't appear to be in his half-dragon form from Green Spirit Island, but had the appearance of a normal cultivator. The Worm King waved his arm. So long as fellow Taoist Feng's information is correct, I won't go back on my word. I will present several of the fruit to you. Fengzai revealed joy upon hearing this and saluted him with both hands. These fruits are greatly useful to me. I'll have to thank you ahead of time. Enough chatter. We'll first have to see if your method will work, the large man said calmly. Be at ease. If I weren't certain, I wouldn't dare to seek you out. This transplant method was something the ancient demon spent all his life researching. Not only is it useful for the dragon-scale fruit tree, but it is also useful for other spirit plants. Fengzai said confidently. The large man chuckled. I hope that is the case. Fengzai smiled and said nothing else. His body flickered with azure light and flew downward. Wait. Fengzai couldn't help but stop the shout. With a sullen expression, the large man said, I still feel there is something amiss. I have a faint sensation of dread. I will use a secret technique to examine the area again to make sure there is nothing wrong. Fengzai felt unhappy when he heard this, but he naturally kept quiet. He had no choice but to comply. With that said, the large man spat out a sparkling golden pearl. With it in his hand, he placed it against his forehead and closed his eyes. Soon after, light passed by, and the light from the pearl gradually shined, and strain appeared on the man's face. The pearl was a rare, supplementary treasure that could greatly increase the power of a cultivator's spiritual sense. When the worm released his spiritual sense, it was strengthened by nearly a half. It also strengthened the range of his spiritual sense farther than before. A short while later, the worm's expression changed and he looked around him with sharp eyes. He withdrew the pearl and loudly shouted, Who dares to sneak up on me? Reveal yourself. His voice shook the air like thunder. Fengzai was greatly shocked to hear this, and bewilderedly released his spiritual sense. The worm had continued to look at a certain spot on the island with an icy expression. I didn't expect your esteemed self to be in possession of such a treasure. It seems I've miscalculated. A voice spoke from where the worm was looking. Then, an azure streak shot forward, arriving 100 meters away from them in the blink of an eye. Han Li calmly looked at the two. It's you. That youth named Li. The Worm King and Fengzai both shouted out following Han Li's appearance, but the expressions on their faces greatly differed. Fengzai had delight on his face, while the worm appeared cautious. The large man narrowed his eyes and coldly asked, What? Does fellow Taoist Feng know this person? Brother Jin, this is the human cultivator who killed your descendant in the past and stole away a treasure I refined. I didn't expect him to see him again in the outer seas after so many years. This time, we cannot allow him to escape. His cultivation. In his excitement, Fengzai swept his spiritual sense past Han Li and his expression vastly changed to disbelief. A golden light flashed from the large man's eyes and he sullenly said, HMPH, escape. Haven't you noticed? This person took the initiative to come to us. Impossible. When I last saw him, he was only a core formation cultivator. How has he acquired the fearsome power of a grand cultivator? When Fengzai sensed Han Li's unrestrained cultivation, his mind grew blank from shock. Fellow Taoist Feng spent several hundred years in secluded cultivation. It seems you haven't heard what happened at Green Spirit Island. There is no doubt that this person is a grand cultivator. His arrival is far from good. We'll have to deal with him carefully, the Golden Worm King said through a voice transmission. Feng Zai licked his lips and nodded without a thought. As the two demons looked at Han Li with hostile expressions, Han Li spoke. Originally, I was only waiting for fellow Taoist Jin. I didn't expect the pleasant surprise of finding another old friend. It seems this trip has been well worth it. He had his hands held behind his back and wore a cold smile after taking a look at the azure-robed demon cultivator. The large man fiercely smiled and boldly asked, "You wish to find me? Could it be you felt that peak-grade spirit stone was too much for you to handle and you wish to hand it over to me? It is still useful to me, so I'm afraid I can't let you have it. This time I've come to take your demon core. If you spit it out for me, we won't have to fight." Han Li's calm words left the two demons completely stunned. The Golden Worm King grinned in his fury and bellowed in savage laughter. "You want my core? You dare you to say such words in front of this king? Good, very good. If you want it, come get it." A layer of dazzling light suddenly shined from his robes, instantly revealing glistening gold armor. Meanwhile, a blinding light appeared from the old devil and glistening scales appeared on his cheek. A dragon's tail appeared from the back of his body. The Demon King was sharp, quickly turning his body into a half-demon state for combat. He flipped his hand, summoning a golden halberd in his hand, silver lightning arcing from its surface. The halberd let out a roll of thunder before blurring out of sight, appearing in front of Han Li just a moment later. It fiercely struck while covered in lightning. The Demon King attacked immediately without another word. Han Li's heart trembled, but he was already prepared. Without a thought, he waved the item he hid in his sleeve. Silver light flashed in front of him, followed by the strange appearance of a meter-large lotus. The golden halberd struck the lotus at its center. A huge eruption sounded and the silver lotus violently swayed, seven-colored Buddhist light shooting out from its center. The spear was blocked, and the light from the lotus faded, but it appeared undisturbed. Han Li quickly formed an incantation gesture with his hands as thunder suddenly rang out from his back where a pair of azure and white wings appeared. With a gentle flap, he appeared over 30 meters away. A sneer appeared on his face as he looked at the two demons. "The thunderstorm wings," Feng Zai shouted in fury upon seeing them, and his body shook. Red light flashed in his hands, summoning a pair of short axes. He waved them, sending them off to Han Li in crimson streaks. Han Li coldly glanced at the demon and snorted. He opened his mouth and spat out an azure mist. It contained a cauldron that was several inches large, the heaven-void cauldron. Han Li uttered the artifact imprint technique in his mind, and a clear ring sounded from the cauldron. Its lid flew off. Winds tore towards Han Li as the two crimson streaks arrived above his head. They spun, just as they were about to cleave down, almost certainly about to tear him to pieces. But Han Li simply extended his finger to the cauldron in front of him and flicked it. Bang! A mass of azure threads shot out, filling the air with azure light and wrapping around the two crimson streaks. Feng Zai was greatly alarmed and hastily commanded his treasures to free themselves. But despite his commands, he watched as the axes were dragged into the small cauldron and away from sight, his mental connection to them severed. When Feng Zai saw this, he was left dumbstruck. When Feng Zai saw this, he felt a chill down his back. Those two axes are something I acquired from a nascent soul cultivator I killed. They have many uncommon abilities, but they were unable to activate and were seized by that unremarkable small cauldron without any effort. As of current, he realized Han Li was no longer the core formation cultivator that fled for his life. After his first strike failed, the Worm King didn't continue his attack. Instead, he recalled the golden halberd with a wave of his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist Feng, be careful. That small cauldron is the heaven-void cauldron of human legend. It would be best for us to attack together." "The heaven-void cauldron. Yes, let's do as you say. So long as we kill this person, I'll give the cauldron to you. All I want are the thunderstorm wings that was taken from me." "It is agreed." The Worm King wildly laughed and golden armor shined from his body. Dazzling golden light radiated from his body as his body ascended into the air like a blazing sun. The light was near blinding. It was clear the demon was circulating the fullest extent of his body's magic power. Then an inconceivable event occurred. The Worm King let out a long shriek, and a light blurred from underneath his ribs, producing another pair of gold-scaled arms. The two arms grabbed at the air and light flashed. One of the arms held a white meter-long sword, while the other was holding onto a small glistening shield. The shield was filled with coin-sized scales, appearing as if they were refined from the scales of the Worm King himself. The demon then pointed his only free hand at the sky and formed an incantation gesture, as if making use of a secret technique. When Han Li saw this, he narrowed his eyes and his face grew sullen. The words "sacred provenance plate" appeared in his mind along with its connection to the elder devils. Feng Zai tore away at the robes on his body to reveal his bare upper body. He then lowered his torso and revealed two protrusions on his back, followed by the unfolding of his wings. Each of the wings was 3 meters long and was bright green. At that same time, Feng Zai's face turned dark gray, and his hands turned into extremely sharp claws that possessed a chilling sheen. Both of the demons were now in half transformations. Han Li curved his mouth several times as he watched this and eventually settled with a slight smile. "It seems you two are taking me seriously now. That is fine, but don't blame me for having some help too." Before the Worm King and Feng Zai understood the meaning of Han Li's words, they heard wailing and shrieks from the horizon, as if something were flying towards them from all sides. At that same time, white light flashed from underneath the island, followed by a dozen white streaks ascending from the ground. "Attack! Kill him before his help arrives." A fierce expression appeared on the Worm King's face as he shouted. Soon after, the Worm King ceased his incantation gesture and opened his mouth, releasing a dense beam of golden light as he set into motion. He pounced so quickly at Han Li, he left an afterimage in his wake, still unleashing light from his mouth. Feng Zai didn't dare to slow down. He unfolded his wings and wrapped himself in a gale, blurring his image as he charged forward. When Han Li saw this, he raised his brow, but he didn't move. He raised his hand to reveal a green wooden ruler and spun it in his palm. A large silver lotus bloomed in front of him and covered him completely. And with a flip of his other hand, a ball of tricolored light lit up, turning into a feathered fan. Han Li took hold of it and waved it in the direction of the incoming ray of light. A pillar of tricolored flame rushed out and struck the golden pillar of light in front of Silver Lotus. A large gust blew from the collision. Although the ray of light was condensed from the Worm King's demon power, the pillar of flame stopped it and seemed to even be consuming it. When the Golden Worm King saw this, his heart trembled, but he didn't stop in the slightest and waved one of his arms. Golden light flickered and the worm scale shield was summoned forward. It turned into a dense barrier of light around him, protecting him as he brandished his other two weapons. White swordlight and the golden spear streak filled the air with flowing radiance, raining down attacks like a storm at the tricolored flame. Not only were the golden spear and the white sword amazingly sharp, but they didn't fear the immense heat from the flames. Gold and white light seemed to weave a net, rigidly blocking the halo of light that followed from the eruption of the flame. Han Li was astonished, but he couldn't deal with this matter as of current, as Feng Zai had circled around him using an unknown movement technique. From over 100 meters away, Feng Zai now flew around to his side. His two wings unfolded, and he readied his claws. The sound of tearing winds loudly sounded. Countless feathers erupted from his wings in a barrage of arrows, and each swipe of his talons produced countless claw streaks, all of them striking at Han Li's silver lotus barrier. Han Li glanced at Feng Zai's overbearing attacks with seeming indifference, but nevertheless, he opened his mouth and summoned 3 golden streaks. Heavy rings continuously sounded out as the azure feathers and claw streaks struck the surface of the lotus, but the attacks seemed to disappear as soon as they struck, while the lotus remained unharmed and continued to spin in place. When shock appeared on Feng Zai's face from seeing his attacks nullified, 3-inch-long golden swords oddly warped in front of him. The demon unconsciously waved his wings in a start, and his body blurred. The sword chi flashed and the small swords pierced holes in him, but all they struck was an afterimage. In the following moment, Feng Zai appeared over 70 meters away. His face was pale as if the maneuver cost him much magic power. Han Li frowned. He hadn't anticipated that the demon would have such mastery over wind evasion techniques. If he wished to kill the demon, he would spend some effort. Having thought this, he commanded the small swords to extend to a foot in length, turn around, and closely pursue Feng Zai. Feng Zai's expression turned cold. Suddenly, a pair of large azure claws appeared in midair and swiped at the swords with lightning speed. In a moment, all of them were captured. A wicked expression appeared from the demon's face, and he used a secret technique to clamp down with all his might. intending to crush them. But when the claws lit up with azure light, he saw that the swords didn't have the slightest trace of damage. Feng Zai's heart dropped. Before he could think of anything else, he heard several drones. The golden flying swords took advantage of his moment of carelessness to break free from their capture, instead winding around the huge claws that captured them and easily cutting them to pieces. The destroyed claws scattered with the wind. The flying swords then changed direction, swiftly continuing their pursuit of Feng Zai. This time, Feng Zai felt an even greater shock. He quickly opened his mouth and an azure jade bowl flew out. It flipped through the air, suddenly producing an azure barrier to sweep away the flying swords. As the two sides clashed, several crisp cracks sounded. Under the bright golden glow of the flying swords, the azure barrier was pierced through with ease. Feng Zai's expression greatly changed. He no longer dared to meet the flying swords head-on, and he flapped his wings, flying off to the sides in an azure streak. The flying swords changed direction, silently continuing their close pursuit at a speed no slower than Feng Zai's. At that moment, the demon began to curse in his mind. As he was forced to twist through the skies, he took a glance at the Golden Worm King. As a result, his heart sank even further. The Golden Worm King blocked the tricolored flames and had arrived next to Han Li. He struck at the silver lotus with ferocity, each attack seeming to scatter the lotus slightly. Within the lotus, Han Li simply waved the emerald ruler in his hand a few times and restored all of the damage with a few flashes of seven-colored Buddhist light. The Golden Worm King was unable to deal with him. Feng Zai's eyes looked around him, and he began to ponder whether he should escape. It was clear that Han Li's current abilities far exceeded what he had imagined, and the ferocious flying swords were more than enough to deal with two of him. But then the demon came to a sudden stop and remained in place, revealing Feng Zai's half-demon form. At some unknown time, a dozen-meter-long snow-white centipedes had surrounded him. They had 4 wings and sparkling crystalline bodies. The 6-winged frost centipedes. When Feng Zai recognized them, he cried out in alarm and wore an unsightly expression. The Golden Worm King's fierce assault on the lotus also came to a sudden stop, and he tore through the air in a golden streak, hoping to get away. Han Li's indifferent voice sounded from within the lotus. "It is already too late to think of running away." As soon as those words were said, 10 red threads shot out from the lotus with extreme speed. They flickered several times and tightly wound around the demon. Following that, light flashed from them, turning into several dense ropes of flame. They continued to roil around him and drown him in them. At that same moment, a gray demon wind blew through the sky, carrying wheel-sized ghost heads. They all appeared fierce and wailed without end. They entered the sea of flames without any regard for it. Within the flames, the Golden Worm King let out a shout of terror. His cold scream contained an immense fear. As Feng Zai swept his gaze past the scene, an icy chill froze over his heart. Be it another attack from Han Li or the dozen 6-winged frost centipedes surrounding him, he wouldn't be able to deal with any of them. Having come to decision, Feng Zai grasped his hand in an incantation gesture, and a crimson red bloomed from his upper body. Blood loudly splurted out from his flesh, hiding his body in a cloud of blood. Meanwhile, the demon's wings absorbed the blood in an instant and turned scarlet. He took a deep breath and waved his wings, intending on fleeing using a secret technique. But at that moment, he heard a beautiful scripture being uttered and a huge attractive force weighing down on his body. The demon felt his body tensed as he was kept in place, the magic power in his body frozen. At that moment, Feng Zai discovered a foot-large silver lotus below him in his terror. It was slowly blooming, keeping him trapped in 7-colored Buddhist light. The demon panicked, immediately casting techniques in an attempt to escape. However, the dozen centipedes surrounding him used this opportunity to spit glacial chi onto him. The icy white chi enveloped him, containing the blood cloud completely. Feng Zai's miserable screams sounded from within it. A distance away, Han Li fiddled with the 8-spirit ruler in his hand with a calm expression, not even taking a glance in Feng Zai's direction. Everything was completely under his control. At that moment, the Golden Worm King's void came to a sudden stop. This caused Han Li to cause his brow and take a look upward. A world-shaking explosion suddenly sounded from within the sea of flames, and the flames scattered in an instant. A gust blew out, followed by something flying at immense speed. Han Li's expression sank and thunder rang out from his back. He vanished. In the next moment, the thing that escaped came to a sudden stop. Above it, azure and white lightning flashed, followed by Han Li's sudden appearance. Han Li looked down and only saw the skeleton of a miniature worm. It was only a foot large and glistened with golden light as if it were created from pure gold. The flood dragon was holding onto a thumb-sized golden core in its mouth. Wails sounded from behind it, and 5 ghost heads charged out from the sea of flames with miserable faces. Their faces were ashen as if they were injured. The golden bone worm stirred upon seeing the sink devils and immediately flew off in a golden streak, soon vanishing from sight. Above, Han Li coldly snorted. Black light flashed from his brow, following the appearance of a third black eye. It released a streak of black light that disappeared as soon as it appeared. As a result, a muffled explosion sounded. Golden and black light intertwined and the bone worm toppled out from the explosion, flipping several times. The bone worm knew things were far from good. It immediately thought to regain its bearings and continue its escape, but it was already too late. Azure light suddenly flashed from nearby, following the appearance of an azure net that appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The bone worm was caught and was unable to move. Meanwhile, a 3-meter-long golden light flew out from the sky. Golden light flashed and the bone worm was cleaved into 2. A green flame flew out from the bone worm yet again, in a desperate escape. However, Han Li was already prepared. He reached out with a single hand, creating a large azure hand and grabbing a hold of the green flame. Following that, Han Li flashed forward and took out a small green bottle with a shake of his sleeve. He flipped the bottle, and it released a black mist. The azure hand relaxed its grip, allowing the mist to sweep past the green flame and draw it back into the bottle. After that was done, Han Li raised the bottle and swept his spiritual sense inside of it, wearing a satisfied expression from what he saw. The soul of a Grade 10 demon beast was an incredibly rare material. Once the small bottle was placed away, he took a look at the golden pearl and the remnants of the bone worm and collected them without a thought. The pearl was clearly his main objective, the metal attribute worm core. As for the golden skeleton, he was rather interested in it. Back in the sea of flames, he saw the Worm King unable to escape the shackles of his flame threads and the jaws of the sink devil. But through some unknown technique, he detonated his flesh and broke free, scattering his constraints and controlling his miniaturized skeleton with his soul. In this manner, the Worm King seemed to have 2 bodies. He would be able to catch his opponent off guard in this inconceivable turn of events, shedding off his flesh and fleeing with his bones. The Worm King was a Grade 10 demon cultivator, and a famous one at that. It would be odd if he were killed off so easily. Han Li possessed 2 spirit treasures and the sink devils. Ordinary late-nascent soul cultivators couldn't hope to compare. The Worm King was already far stronger than ordinary demon beasts, but the 8-spirit ruler had miraculous defensive abilities, and he naturally wasn't able to break through in a short amount of time. And with the capture by the renowned fire spirit threads and the flesh-eating sink devils suppressing him, Han Li was able to subdue him without any further abilities. Han Li curiously examined the golden skeleton and hesitated before placing it in his storage pouch as well. At that moment, Fengzai remained trapped within the white glacial mist to no surprise. The frost chi of the dozen centipedes had already sealed it into ice. Han Li glanced at the enemy he once feared long ago and shook his head. His thoughts stirred, and he had his flying sword streak around the block of ice. Suddenly, the ice split into chunks, and a green demon soul rushed out from it, fleeing off in a panic. But it ran into a centipede head first and was swallowed with hardly any resistance, becoming mere insect food. With the 2 demons were killed, Han Li decided to examine the storage pouches they left behind. Han Li found a pleasant surprise. From Fengzai's storage pouch, he acquired an ancient jade slip detailing several demon cultivator techniques as well as information on the dragon scale fruit. It also detailed methods to uproot and transplant different kinds of spirit trees. It should prove greatly useful. From the storage pouch of Worm King, he found an interesting technique called the tempered bone arts. It would allow humans and demons to cultivate their skeleton to the point of becoming a magic treasure, and in the process, it would turn one's flesh unreasonably powerful. It was a pity that it took much time to cultivate this technique. He was too busy to cultivate this technique was of current, but he collected it into his storage pouch nonetheless. After he collected all of the sink devils and centipedes, he immediately flew off in an azure streak and flew into the nearby seas. Since the dragon scale fruit had such miraculous effects, he couldn't let it go. Letter 1D453, letter 1D633, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D626. letter 1d624, letter 1d45c, letter 1d45a. As a result, Han Li eliminated several restrictions he found in a cave underneath the sea and eventually found the tree. Fortunately, Feng Zai packed all the materials he needed to uproot the spirit tree. Han Li naturally put them to good use and shrunk the tree for temporary storage in his pouch. In the time it took to finish a meal, an azure streak brushed through the seas and disappeared off the horizon. When Han Li returned to the inner star seas and the heavenly south, almost another year had passed. When he returned to the Dream Cloud Mountains travel-worn, Nangong Wan, his disciples, and several sect elders gathered together with him for a secret discussion. After most of a day passed, they all left. Their expressions were all grave, as if the topic had been of great importance. Not long after, the Drifting Cloud Sect's disciples discovered that the sect had begun to gather together large quantities of obscure spirit medicines, no matter what the cost. At that same time, cultivators in higher positions of the sect repeatedly gathered together for discussions. Not long after, a piece of information was made known throughout the heavenly south. Han Li, the Grand Elder of the Drifting Cloud Sect, in his last journey acquired a secret technique that would aid in breaking through to deity transformation. However, the secret technique was quite peculiar and required a special area to cultivate. As such, the greatest cultivator in the heavenly south planned on departing from the Drifting Cloud Sect for several hundred years in secluded cultivation, apart from life or death situations for the sect, or until he fails in cultivating this technique. He will not easily emerge from this place. When this information was made known, the higher echelons of the large sects had different attitudes spanning from excitement, happiness, worry, and fear that great events will shake the heavenly south once more. After a year passed, not only did Han Li disappear, but his Tao companion Nangong Wan, Mu Paling, and his other personal disciples also disappeared. But Liu Yu did remain at the sect. The Drifting Cloud Sect ceased their attitude of expansion and began to consolidate their existing power. Although the other sects eyed the resources of the Drifting Cloud Sect with greed, Han Li's fearsome reputation kept them at bay. A year, 10, and 100 passed by. The greatest cultivator of the heavenly south had completely disappeared and had yet to make another appearance. In the Drifting Cloud Sect, the Dream Cloud Mountains, and even the heavenly south, Han Li's reputation began to fade with time and fewer people mentioned him. After an unknown amount of time, the Grand Elder of the Drifting Cloud Sect turned into a legend, and his position remained empty for over 1,000 years before a new Grand Elder was selected for the sect. But after nearly 1,000 years, a golden era appeared yet again for the Drifting Cloud Sect. Nascent soul cultivators sprouted up in large numbers, elevating the sect to becoming a superpower in the heavenly south. Its prosperity remained for thousands of years to come.